Hello and welcome to part 4 of the GeekVerse Sidequest Game of the Year celebration. This is the finale where we're doing our top 10 lists. This is it. We all lead up to this moment. I am the Adam Hartcaster, Dylan Must, and I have with me, of course, Dante, who's been with me for these last 3 episodes here into the end of this thing. So how you feeling on this? Once again, Saturday afternoon. I like this recording time we're doing. I feel like I'm very energized and ready to go, and I have nowhere to be. I'm just ready to go.
I got to sleep in and recharge and get ready for the final round here, man. I've been dreaming about this one. I'm ready to fight for some of the best of the year.
I love it. So yeah, as a quick recap of what we did to get to this point. So did things a bit different this year, and we had 3 episodes leading up to this. We did our first episode, which we just listed off all the games we did play, to say what's kind of eligible. We looked back at our last year's list. And we also did best visuals and music. That was a lot of fun. And then Taylor's Game of the Year was in that episode. Second up, we did the best levels of the year. That was a lot of fun, talking about just, 40, 50 levels that we really enjoyed this year. And then in that episode, Travis shared his Game of the Year. And then in the most recent one here, we did the best characters of the year, both debut and kind of appearances, returning characters. And then Kirkland shared his Game of the Year in that one as well. So it's been a lot of fun to get to this point. But yes, of course, is what it all leads toward is the top 10 games of the year. Before we get into it, I'm curious how much you're, obviously without revealing what they are, just how much things have been solidifying or moving, or I don't know. Now that we're here, how do you feel about this year overall? Now that we've had hours talking about it.
Previous years, the discussions have made them slide, some titles slide up and down, or maybe something that wasn't even in the top 10. I was like, you know what, maybe that is number 10.
Yeah.
This year, it's been pretty solid. I haven't adjusted much at all. There's maybe been 1 or 2 things that have been they're tied in my head still, and I kind of shifted one up because the conversation went so well on it. But overall, it's been a pretty tight list for me this year, and it hasn't moved around too much. Just a couple ones at the end of the year here that have kind of struck a chord with me, and maybe have slid into that 10 spot, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think for me, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was okay, I think I'm pretty solid on what my, at least the top 5 are, and then that bottom 5, I think things are gonna have to wait and see how things go. And I was I don't know, this is my game here. It doesn't feel quite right. So I kept shifting things around until eventually something locked in. I'm I feel really good about this. This feels right and indicative of who I am. And then I think from our discussions last week, the only thing that changed is my thing that was at 9 went to 8. And then those 2 things swapped spots. That was pretty much the only thing. And also I played that game that we're going to talk about more in this week. And it kind of maybe jumped it up a slot there. But yeah, it's been pretty solid, but also I feel most of this year, so many of the heavy hitters for me came out in those first 3 or 4 months, and so my list, my top 5 whatever, was just the same for most of the year. And it's not that that's unexciting, but I'm glad that in the last maybe 2 or 3 months here, I've been playing a lot more things that are actually jumping up into that tier as well. So maybe there's a bit of a lull in the summer when a couple of those games might be in my bottom half of the top 10, but I'm very happy with my list. I feel very solid about it now. I think it's pretty much been set in stone for the last few days here, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, I think you raised a good point. This year specifically had a variety of styles or genres of games that really I think tell a tale about me as the type of games that I really like, or the types of stories or visuals that I'm really into. This is, you could put this as my bio this year.
I love it. That's amazing. So very quickly before we dive into our top 10, just any honorable mentions. Now for us, we talked about this right beforehand, that we do those best of categories. We talk about our favorite things for, I think was 5-6 hours if you combine those episodes. So we did talk about anything for me that would be an honorable mention came up either in best visuals or had a really good level from it, or a character or something like that. But I just had one shout out in the honorable mention territory, which was Dungeon. So at the start of this year, Wordle was a thing, right? Technically, Wordle came out in December of last year, but whatever. That's a 2022
year.
It had its moment this year, it came out last year. I guess that was another one that we didn't mention in the games we played. It's kind of a weird one, but from Wordle, was spawned like a million copycats, and the one that I got really invested in was Dungeon, which is just a daily dungeon. There's 5 slots. You got to figure out, which hero, which goon enemy, and like what treasure is in each one, and very much that world kind of way, except instead of letters it's just little sprites of characters. And I played that for probably at least a good 100 days consecutive.
Damn.
Or more, because I mean, yeah, it takes like a minute, and I really enjoyed figuring out a puzzle of that, where like if there's a coin in the dungeon, there's going to be another coin somewhere, or if like this enemy unit is here, there's going to be a second one of them, or there's special cases where there's usually always a hero, but then if there's a special couple cases where there isn't, and stuff like that. It's just figuring out all of the kind of logic of it, and the kind of the way that Wordle is like just how languages are built and stuff. That was a very fun time for me. Now, it's a very simple game. It doesn't look very good. There's no music, there's no levels, there's no characters, so it hasn't come up for me yet, but I really enjoyed that game, and for a good while it was sitting in my top 10, even though it's like a very simple game. But it was a very fun ritual for me, and it kept me engaged a hell of a lot longer than Wordle did. Though Wordle is great for what it is as well.
I played a ton of Wordle, and I don't know how I forgot that was this year. For some reason, I felt like that was last year. But that sounds more up my alley than Wordle ever was. So like, I'm surprised it slid by me completely. Like, I'm definitely interested in that. Like, I don't know, that daily concept sinks its teeth into me pretty quickly. Like,
especially in those cases where it's quite literally 30 seconds to a minute at most, because sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna play some Marvel Snap, and then you get hooked in, you're like end up playing for 2 hours or something like that. But for ones like that you really can only play for a minute, I think it feels healthier too.
Oh yeah, Marvel Snap got problematic this year. I have one as well, and the only reason we did not talk about it at all leading up to this is it wasn't out. So kind of a little surprise banger for me at the end of the year. So I have been obsessively playing Crisis Core Final Fantasy Reunion. Final Fantasy Crisis Core Reunion.
I thought you were going to bring up Chained Echoes. That's the game I thought you were.
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit last time, and that game looks really, really cool too, but I did not give that one a shot yet. So Chained Echoes is like a game on Game Pass that looks a lot like Chrono Trigger, so definitely interested in that guy. But Crisis Core is one of those remakes that I'm just like, you guys did everything you had to do. It reminds me a lot of maybe a lesser version of the Demon Souls remake, where it's like very true to its core mechanics. It's not changing those up a lot, but like, there's added voice acting. The engine makes it look like the Final Fantasy VII remake, so it's beautiful. And then just like they updated the combat, so it's like way smoother. There was like a timing to original Crisis Core that was like boom, 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 and now you're playing like an action game. So they made this into something that I was like just a million times more palatable than the original PSP game was, and is making me enjoy that so much more than I was previously. I'd say the only gripe I have with this game is kind of built into it, and kind of built into old Final Fantasy in general, is they didn't update any of the writing. So it's just melodramatic as hell. Some of it is so corny. I have laughed at some very serious parts, but overall it's one of the better remakes I've ever played. Like, really
cool, really
solid. Just it's for people who like Kingdom Hearts and Crisis Core or in Final Fantasy, and like that kind of modern version of action RPG from Square. If that's not your bag, then it's most definitely not. But I dig it a lot.
Nice, cool. I'm excited to pick up Final Fantasy, 16 next year, because I'm not a Final Fantasy guy at all, but that one looks great, so I'm probably
that's a Yoshi P joint too. That's right up my alley. That's directed by the same guy who does Final Fantasy 14.
Well, I'm sure you'll be back on Sidequest then to talk about it, but
yes, sir.
With that, let's get right into the top 10. Dante, I'm going to throw to you first. What is your 10th game of the... That sounds like a weird way to word that, but what is your number 10 here on your game of the year list?
This has changed. Like, this is the one that's shifted a million times over the last few weeks. Midnight Suns.
Oh,
Midnight
damn. I
Suns
love to
snuck
hear
its way
that.
into my number 10. So funny enough, the one that was previously my number 10 was Marvel Snap. So I just
Oh,
shifted one.
okay. The Marvel slot this year was number
Yeah,
10. I love it.
number 10 is my Marvel slot. So it really has been kind of a back and forth there. And the thing that I just really appreciated about Midnight Suns is that combat is so damn fun and engaging. Like, I feel like there's just so much room to customize those characters to be exactly what you want them to be. It's so funny because, like, I guess it feels the same way in Marvel Snap, but I just really enjoy spending 30 minutes kind of on this combat puzzle versus stressing out trying to win against a person, which is also very fun. But something about Midnight Suns combat just spoke to me. I'm a big fan of the XCOM series. This is very different from that still. And I think their card combat, which is I think a lot of people roll their eyes at these days, is excellent. Like, one of the best kind of like modern card combat options I've had. Like the fact that each independent character gets its own deck, and you're kind of working to find synergies between all of your characters versus just like building a deck and those characters being within that deck. You're kind of swapping characters out all the time, and you're kind of trying to find ways to make them always work together, regardless of like if one or two people are injured. That's usually like your main guy. Yeah, I just think it's really, really smartly designed. I do have some gripes with it. I know there's a lot of people really do enjoy kind of the dating sim aspect in this game. I'm a big Persona fan, and I'm a big like fan of Fire Emblem, and I think those just do it so much better. That this feels a little bit like fluff to me sometimes. Sometimes the dialogue is doesn't feel as, it does a thing that a lot of video games struggle with, I think. Whereas there are stakes, and then they're just hanging out and doing silly stuff on the side, and I'm just like, but what about this serious thing that we have to deal with? Why are we joking around and
Get
playing
out of the
video games
pool.
right
What are you
now?
doing in there?
Yeah,
You gotta
like,
fight
why
some
am I staring at
demons.
this guy in his shorts right now when he should be like working on saving Wanda? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So that's just a bit of a disconnect for me, but it is nice to kind of like break it up. It would get I think a little exhausting if it was just combat. So it's good that they put something there, and that can be entertaining for sure. Also the Abbey grounds reminds me a lot of the crypts from Mortal Kombat, which I was
I don't know anything about those.
well, it is just like this big open area that you kind of wander through, and there's like things you can interact with in the world, but ultimately you're there to open up chests.
Right. Okay.
It's very similar. But once again, I think I'm more happy that they add variety than upset about it. It's not the stuff that I'm here for. The thing that I want out of that game is that combat, and I think they do that so incredibly. I cranked the difficulty up to like I'm on Heroic 2 now. I might max it all the way out. I'm really enjoying kind of how tough some of these fights are. Like, it's gotten to the point where I was like plowing through the game because they start you off on normal, and then by the time the missions I'm doing now, I might do a side mission on hard that takes me like 10 tries. I'm spending like hours on one mission, and
I'm getting really wrecked on the general missions right now, and just obliterating the main story quests. And they're both on normal difficulty, so I don't know what's going on there, but there's some weird balance thing going on.
Well, hopefully it doesn't start punishing me. But the cool part is you can scale up and down the difficulty as you want. And the fact that they give you more rewards based on what difficulty you have is just kind of one of those perfect difficulty systems. It really does kind of like give you a really good incentive to crank the difficulty up. But if you bring it down, it doesn't feel like you're losing a lot. You just feels like maybe you need to grind a little bit more. Whereas like the harder difficulties, you can just do a mission one time and get as much experience as you would on a normal mission that you maybe had to do 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. So. Have you beat the game yet? Because I know last time we talked, you were ahead of me. Have you unlocked Hulk then yet?
No. Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
I haven't got him yet either. So curious.
Yeah, that game's long, man. I've had a few games that kind of snuck in that I was like, you know what, I want to play more of this and kind of round out my year a little bit, make sure I have talking points for all of this stuff, revisited some things. But Midnight Suns is definitely still like up there. Crisis Core and Midnight Suns are going back and forth between the thing that I'm playing right now. And Midnight Suns is honestly excellent. Like good shit, Firaxis.
Nice
as
job.
a fellow Marylander, really
Okay. Nice.
really love
Hometown.
that.
Good stuff. Okay, my number 10 is I'm so surprised to see it on my list, but I got to do it. And this is when I was playing the game, this is absolutely not in that tier for me. Even when I finished it, it was not there. After the first review it wasn't there. But Dante, it was our second spoiler cast that really tipped the scales.
Let's
Number 10,
go.
God of War Ragnarok. So
Oh,
for some people who didn't listen to those reviews,
cathartic
or they
moment
might
right
feel like that's really low for God of War. Why are you talking about it in this way? But
there.
for me, I'm very glad that it is at that caliber for me to make that top 10, because the 2018 one is kind of I'd say mid experience overall for me, even though I do like the story. There's just so much shit in that game that I don't like. But I think this game, in the gameplay side of things, that's really not why it's here, to be honest. It's more well rounded. They roughed off some of those they sanded off some of those rough edges, what I'm trying to say. So it's a bit better, but for me it's just that the characters are so well done, from the voice acting to just the mocap. The way they interact with the scenery is just like so realistic in a way that many other games don't. The story is fantastic. I don't feel the need to spoil certain twists or anything like that. I can go back to our spoiler cast for that. But there are so many great moments in the story that are unexpected or heartbreaking, and it just kept me captivated the whole way through. So yeah, I'm very happy to see this one crack in my top 10. I mean, go back to our characters episode. 6
Yeah.
of our 10 nominations or whatever final top characters of the year were all from this game, and I think that's just a testament to how great the story is, how great those characters are. So very happy this one just squeaked in there in my top 10.
I'll talk about it more, so I'll let us just
Yeah.
go on to the next one. You can imagine, if you've listened to any of those previous podcasts, that one's probably up there for me. So happy to see that on your top 10, though. That makes me
I am too. I'm glad that I can be there with the love that everyone else has for it. 'Cause it is truly great.
feels good.
If it had amazing gameplay, oh my god, it's one of my favorite games of all time. But we don't need to get into that. That's fine.
I was going to say, you can't just throw punches and then walk away like that, man.
Hey, it's in my top 10 solidly. For me, there was no jumping. There's nothing that was like in 11 like really punching at it. It's like, no, this is a very solid pick. So
Very cool.
Let's just cruise right into number 9. What do you got next?
I'll defend that combat later. My number 9, a game that also surprised me, especially after like looking at trailers for it, looking at kind of screenshots of it, like realizing that there's no voice acting in it. I was like, man, this game is not going to be for me at all. And it is one of the best games of the year for me by far, and that's Pentiment.
All right.
Pentiment really, like I said, surprised the hell out of me. This was a game that I think just has some of the best writing I've experienced in a game in a while. And like, obviously it's an Obsidian joint, so like that's to be expected, but it's really up there with like, I love Pillars of Eternity. I know we talked about this a little bit in the last couple episodes as well, that like this just continues to prove that they might have some of the best writing chops in like video games right now.
Yeah,
like especially when it comes down to like telling a really deep story that you can kind of take pieces of and not see the whole picture, but still get something that is absolutely phenomenal and more geared towards the decisions that you've made throughout. Like there's really nobody holding a flame to them at all. So I went into great detail in it when we were talking about kind of art and talking about characters, but just the way that game is presented to you is really different too. Like you're playing it through the course of an entire person's life. So like from act to act, you're seeing like 20-30 years pass, which is pretty different from a lot of video games I've played. Definitely. And it does kind of really make you understand that like these small moments that you these decisions that you had to make in these moments that felt minor in the moment had huge sweeping repercussions over multiple people's life. And it's really effective in doing that. And just like the way you talked, like letting a little girl steal your hat, she ends up like handing that hat over to her children, and like ends up being this like just weird little decisions you make throughout just have such big or create big and small moments in the future, and it just feels like well thought out in a way that not a lot of games are when it comes to their stories. Just a massive success for such a small team from Obsidian, and makes me so excited for like Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed. Like, I'm like foaming at the mouth for those games now, because
same.
both of their releases this year were excellent.
Yeah, they're crushing it. Next up for me is going to be Sniper Elite 5. This is a funny one because the story, opposite of God of War, the story, characters, voice acting, I don't give a shit about any of that. There's online competitive multiplayer. I don't care. There's an invasion system. I played with it a little bit, but not what I'm here for.
I didn't know that.
There's
That's pretty
so
cool,
much of this game that I just like cut around the edges. I'm like, I do not care about any of that. But for me, it's that core gameplay experience that I love. A good mix of stealth and combat, and this game it excels at both of those very much so. The maps are massive and sprawling and so intricate, and it's so obvious how well they are designed as either kind of little stealth puzzles or little battle arenas. Like, either way, I found this is truly one of those games where I did play like 50-50 in terms of play style, and most games I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go like full stealth route this time, or what I'm really like in the combat, I'm gonna go full that route. But like Sniper Elite, I really took that 50-50 route, and it was so much fun. I kind of gawked about this in the levels discussion that we did, where like every single level in this game is fantastic and one of the best levels of the whole year. And yeah, just they're beautiful. They are massive and intimidating. I think one thing that, comparing this to Hitman, which is a pretty fair comparison, I would say, I don't think this game does a great job of offering, like, there's just so many incentives and ways that Hitman pushes you back into those levels over and over again to try different things and experience them and discover whole new sections you wouldn't have before. I think that's actually something Sniper Elite is kind of struggling with here, and I wish they had done that. Of course, I can go in and be like, okay, I'm going to try this whole different thing now, but if there isn't that like in-game incentive or reason, or even just like clue of like, sometimes you'll see a Hitman challenge and you're like, the fact that that's possible makes me curious on how I would do that, and then you start exploring more. So I think that's something that would maybe elevate this game to crack past the top 9. But for me, the fact that this is kind of just I'm really zooming on one part of the game, and it still is making my top 10 out of like 60 games I played this year, I think is very impressive. And it's one of those things that as soon as I finished it, I wish listed all the games previous, because I'm like, I got to pick all these up and play through all these games now, because I just love the level design here. So well designed. So shoutouts to Sniper Elite 5.
That game sounds like a blast. Every time you talk about that, I'm like, I have to at least poke around in that and shoot someone in the nuts.
Yeah, I mean, that part of it too, like, it is a very goofy game at times, like, it just actively making me laugh at certain interactions or situations and stuff like that. So I don't feel like many games are able to do that without, like having a funny line of dialogue or something, but it's just in the mechanics of it. So shout outs to Sniper Elite. So maybe with that, we'll take our first break, and then we'll get into the rest of our list here. Okay, we are back. Dante, take it away with your number 8 pick.
Yeah, this is another one that was like kind of early in the year. A sequel to, one of my favorite of this genre. So I'm a big fan of like Castlevania likes. I'm a huge fan of Monster Hunter. So this game just kind of mixed those absolutely perfectly. Salt and Sacrifice is my number 8 here. And yeah, this game is just super cool. Ska Studios joined, so they're known for Charlie Murder, Salt and Sanctuary, right? Very bizarre art style on these. He hand draws every single thing in the game, whether it be backgrounds. Like nothing is like a template from a sprite bank. He's literally hand drawing every little thing in the game, and has this very unique art style. It's going to be, I think, hit or miss for some people, but it really hits for me. I think it's kind of bizarre in a good way. Very dark and kind of like metal as well, which is definitely something I'm a big fan of. But the best parts about this game is like it's very so just kind of paint a picture real quick for you. It is the gameplay is very much like a Castlevania, like a 2D Castlevania or a Metroidvania of sorts. And then the way that you customize your characters is very Dark Souls. And also the combat actually does have kind of that weight and heaviness to it that Dark Souls has, which makes it such a smart decision to do a Monster Hunter like for it, because that is already something that's kind of built into Monster Hunter as well, as this kind of like heavy weighted combat and this kind of like kind of pacing that is important to like wait for your opponent to do his thing and really learn your enemies while you're also just out there trying to kind of like do as much damage as humanly possible. But the builds variety in this game is massive. You can be a heavy weapons guy, you can be a magic guy, there's so many different versions of magic. There's like 10 or so weapons or something like that of weapon types, and then there's dozen weapons within those weapon types. The skill tree is huge and really one of the better skill trees that exists in video games. It's similar to a sphere grid from Final Fantasy X or a Path of Exile, that kind of like huge thing of spheres. But I think this one is more legible than maybe both of those games, where you kind of look at the sphere grid or this skill tree, and you really kind of can plan out your build super early and have an idea of which directions you want to go. Whereas some of those games, you feel like you have to like get halfway through a spot before you realize you messed up, and then you can work your way back. But it also builds in a really good mechanic to get spheres back, and you actually like build that into the game, into your build. So you'll like work your way in a direction, and then you'll delete spheres from the route you came to get points back, and then you can go further into that skill tree. It's one of the smarter level up mechanics that I've experienced in a while. But then the main meat and potatoes of the game is going into one of the levels, which are all like extremely varied. Some are forests, some are like bogs, some are like castle towns, like all types of different levels, and going in and hunting these mages, which are like your big monsters, and you're killing them, getting resources from them, or like farming those mages over and over again to build out new gear. And it is just a really successful loop. It expands on the combat that's super fun in Salt and Sanctuary, while flipping it really heavily and not just being Salt and Sanctuary 2. It is in a lot of ways a very different game, and it's a cool way to let those kind of stand next to each other. And like you can recommend them both to different groups of people, or you can recommend like, hey, you can play Salt and Sacrifice first before you play Salt and Sanctuary, and you'll get as much out of both as you can. Whereas like Salt and Sanctuary is almost like a 2D Souls-like, whereas this is just, it's cool that it's more than that. It really, I think when I went into it, I was assuming kind of just more of a 2D Souls game, and it's cool that they try something different. And I can't think of too many like 2D Monster Hunter clones.
Yeah, that's a very cool concept.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. They did some smart stuff there. Ska Studios has been I don't know. They've as far as like 2D action combat, I think they're up there, man. They do some really cool stuff, and this one is, I think, equally as impressive as some other previous games.
Love it. Yeah, I'm glad you're able to rise that one up, because that is, I've heard just radio silence on that. I've listened to a lot of gaming podcasts. I don't think I've heard a single person talking about that game this year. So, which is weird, because I feel like I heard a lot about the first one. So I don't know what. Yeah. Was it like in early access for a while? Is there something weird like that?
No, this one just like I think slipped through the cracks. I think the Ska Studios team kind of
come out like Elden Ring week or something weird like that.
It did come out really close. It was like it was kind of right before, I think, which is tough for them. It was a nice way to get me kind of nice and ready for some Elden Ring.
Yeah,
I'm curious now, like how close it came out, because it was right there. It was it was after. It was like a month after, or a month or two after. So
people were still playing Elden Ring then at that point in time.
I think Elden Ring screwed the pooch for most games this year.
Yeah, it just devoured everything. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Monster Hunter guy, and I'm not like, I like some Metroidvanias, but it's not really my genre. But I really want to check this one out. So it's going on my backlog list, and at some point in my life, I would like
excellent
to play it.
Co-op. So
cool.
Yeah, good opportunity to hop into a game together if you're interested.
Yeah, would you play it on PC?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out.
It takes
good stuff.
I was going to say it's one of the you could play this on a laptop from 2006. So
Okay, my laptop's pretty good, so I think I can probably.
I'm just saying it can play on anything. So
nice.
Sounds cool to you? No excuse.
Next up for me is the game I was mentioning where it was ninth. When we were doing our best of, but it climbed up a slot, and I think it actually is a case for 7 as well. I think that's maybe the highest it would go. But a game I just finished this week too, Neon White. Dante, thank you once again so much for convincing me to get this, because I had it on my wish list. I was like checking out. I was like, it's kind of expensive, but I mean, it's only like $30 or something, but like more than like most indies in that same space. But I'm so glad I pulled the trigger on it, because if we're talking about just strictly game feel, that nebulous term of game feel, just like how good it feels to control the game, this is game of the year for me. Like, this just feels, you just feel so amazing doing everything in this game. When you get an ace on your first attempt, like, that is one of the best feelings. And then the opposite side of it, if you spend 15 minutes like theory crafting a level, looking for shortcuts, looking for weird sight lines so you can like try and almost cheese the level, quote unquote cheese the level, and then to finally get that ace after you've put in all that effort of route like setting and then going through and like nailing all the timing of it, that also feels just as good. I think they give you a lot of reason, not just the aces, but also the gifts of like interacting with the levels in different ways and kind of having a little Easter egg at each level in a lot of ways. Sometimes they're obvious and you see them and it's just a matter of like, oh, I got to save these 2 cards. But oftentimes you have to go around and hunt through the level in a way that you would not normally do, which I think is pretty engaging. But yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our best levels well, I think we've talked about it in every single category, but the best levels, you were talking about 1,000-Pound Butterfly, and I'm so glad you did, and I put all my faith in you there, because I agree that has got to be the best like pack of levels in that game. Partly because it's the last one, so you're getting all of the tools at the same time. But just particularly the Book of Life is such a great card. It's so much fun, and once again, that totally changes. Like, that's particularly the sightline one where you're like, maybe if I can jump at this weird angle, look through this strange window, and like, just get this crazy shortcut that feels like you were the only person to have ever found it, even if I'm sure that's like, everyone's seen that before too. But yeah, I love this game. It's so much fun.
Yeah, man, 1,000-Pound Butterfly is so cool. I know we talked about it at length, but the Book of Life has just opened up a whole new door in that game. Like, it made me feel like I wish I had this throughout the entire like every single level, just teleport all over the map. Definitely. It's a blast.
And
I'll talk about the online more.
For me too, like honestly, I was loving the whole game. I think the one part that was feeling a bit weaker for me was when I got the rocket launcher, because I like the rocket jump, but the zip line to me was like, okay, this slows the game down massively. It feels like way more like there's a lot of different places you can shoot it, but I feel like it's kind of unclear, and it made it almost feel like more linear in a way. But then, the Book of Life is just the opposite of that, where it's this exact same as the zip line, but then it's just so much quicker. Well, not the exact same, because you're not hitting walls, but it's just so much quicker, so much snappier, like it works really well. So I think that like immediately like turned me around on that too. And then, after I beat the game, I spent a couple days to go back, get ace on everything, and did all the side quests as well. So that was a lot of fun doing all those things. I think I'm done with it now. Like, there's those like Hell Rush modes you can do like all of the levels in one run, and I don't know if I'm gonna do that. That's probably like maybe a few months from now I'll feel kind of nostalgic for it and I want to play it again. Then maybe I'll like do that at one point, but then it'll be tricky because I don't remember how to do any of it. So I don't know if I'll really engage with that content. But going through that base game, what an enjoyable time! Like, such a fun experience. As I've always loved speed running, I've never really gotten into it. I've tried a couple games to learn a couple things, but it's like, okay, you got to spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours to really get competent at like a speed running a game. Each game has its own language and whatnot. But I think Neon White is able to do that as like the entry level way. And the fact that every level cranks up the complexity with the different cards and the different enemy types and stuff like that, it hits that kind of speed running, like why speedrunning is so fun, but makes it kind of accessible too, which I think is interesting, because this game is still very difficult, but it still feels like very accessible in that way. So I just love this experience.
You can be an expert at one level, right? Like speedrunning, you have to be like incredible in an entire game, but you can be like, I'm going to be the best at this one level, and just like climb up those leaderboards. That leaderboard is also something that keeps that game incredibly engaging, because if you have friends who are playing it, that's unbeatable. Like, that's just like, man, I need to get higher score than my friend just to gloat. That's
I know. I kind of wish I was playing the game at the same time that you were, so that we could kind of go back and forth on that. But yeah, if you do go back now, there's a good chunk of levels that you'll have some additional times you got to beat. So that was
bullshit.
A lot of fun, kind of having like a little stretch goal beyond the ace. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so close to beating Dante. I got to do this.
Did you see any of the developer badges? Like that's the one above the ace.
And
badge.
I haven't actually watched any actual like speedrunners speedrunning it, but that is something that I wanna check out as well, because I'm sure it's just a whole different experience than me. Like an ace is like easy compared to what these guys are doing, right?
Yeah, some of the developer badges, it's just like you are breaking the game.
Yeah,
it's crazy and really entertaining. Like some levels you're getting in like 0.3 seconds. There's like absurdity insane that they're doing. Man, Neon White's so good. I'm just gonna. I'll stop because I want to talk about it. It just opens this door, man, where I want to start talking about like top 5 stuff a little bit. But getting into the next one on my end, something that I feel like has gotten its due a little bit in the masses, and I'm very happy it is, because it's a super original game and a really, really cool direction from their previous one, and that's Sifu. I think Sifu is best fighting game of the year. No,
ask the Game Awards. I agree with you.
That's such a weird place for that to be, but it does have excellent fighting mechanics built into a like an action game. They do some really cool stuff about just the way that you fight in that game is so stinking cool, and like just parrying enemies. It is one of the like most I think at first difficult to pick up combat systems I've experienced in a game in a really long time. But once you kind of you hit a point where you figure out the parry mechanic, you figure out the dodge mechanic, and you feel like a monster in this game. It is really one of those perfect representations of like a really strong like difficulty curve. Yeah, where it, like I'd say at the beginning you feel like this is impossible. How do I even get through the first level without aging so far that I die? So there is that kind of like aging mechanic. So there's I believe 5 levels, can't remember 100%. This is a very early in the year game, so
February, right?
Spare me. I kind of have forgotten a few of the major mechanics or the minor mechanics here, but the aging system carries through the entire game. You have to beat the game before you age up so far that you are too old that you die. Yeah, you die of old age. So there's people who are going through this game trying to beat it at 21 years old, I think is when you start the game. I think the youngest I beat the game at is 27. Nice. So it's real close there. And it's just one of those like things where it has really smart checkpointing too. So from level to level, like if you get beat the first 2 levels at 21, you just get your ass beat on level 3. You can just keep going back and starting at level 3. You don't have to constantly start from the beginning to do that kind of like level 21 run. But the parry system and the dodge system is really cool. So like enemies are swinging low or swinging high, and you have to dodge low or high. Some of the attacks you can parry. The parry ends up being very Sekiro-like, where you're like bang, 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 bang in your parry timing. And you have to like hit it on time every single punch. That stuff just feels excellent. It feels like it's taking what Sekiro was doing and then distilling it into this like very interesting combat experience. Instead of kind of creating, I guess it still does have plenty of variety, but instead of creating opportunities to like run around and do stealth and kind of like grapple hook your way around, it's more about just like completing these combat puzzles once again. And I think Sifu is just one of those, again, like original experiences that is totally built for the kind of like gamer I am. I hate the word gamer. I don't know why I like stumbled over that. I was like, I don't want to say that out loud. Yeah, but it really does kind of suit me a lot because I really like fighting games. I really like Souls-likes. And then just the ability to feel creative in your combat in a way that isn't like building out this whole different kind of character, but just like having your own flow in these fights, and feeling like, okay, I'm somebody who really enjoys like using my environment. So I'm going to like hop over ledges. I'm going to kick stuff at people. I'm going to throw bottles. I'm going to grab weapons. And there's people who are just like totally focused on doing like long combos on enemies and breaking their poise essentially. It has just, I think, top tier video game combat. It's one of those that I think a lot of people bounced off of because they found it to be so incredibly difficult. But I think that is the game's way of just teaching you. It kind of forces you to learn its mechanics, and in a way that's pretty ruthless. But
or you stop playing. Like me.
Yeah, it's a roguelike at the end of the day, and I feel like so many roguelikes are that. So if you're prepared to have this thing that you stumble upon over and over again until you really start, it has these epiphany moments that I don't think a lot of games give you the opportunity to have, where you do feel like you're just like truly getting better at something. Yeah, Sifu is so fun. The art style is really cool. The reason I think it's a cool direction from their previous game, because Absolver was maybe too much for me. That game has way too much customization, and then the fact that it's mainly multiplayer, I found it really rough because people were just crushing me immediately. Right. This game, it feels like you can really plow through at your own pace and learn at your own pace. And as long as you're not somebody who gets super frustrated with video games, I think this one can really starts to shine once you figure out.
There's an easy mode in there now too, so it makes it a bit more accessible.
Don't do that. Just play it on normal. Play it on normal. Well, like
I'd rather enjoy the game on easy than not be able to enjoy it at all. So
I just feel like that's true, but I feel like this isn't a game like that you played through for the story, right? Like I think the mechanics are where it shines. So forcing you to deal with the mechanics is I think you will have more enjoyment down the road. But I can understand this game being incredibly frustrating for some.
Yeah, it's just super hard. But no, the age mechanic and the idea of going through levels to like perfect them to do like I guess have better chances in the next one is very cool concept. So I wish the gameplay actually clicked more for me, but I'm glad it's in there in your top 7 slot there. For me, let's keep it in the roguelike house here. So for me, number 7 is going to be Rogue Legacy 2, a game that even though the first game I feel like was a big deal, I feel like this one still went very much under the radar, and it had like 2 years in early access or something, so that kind of takes the wind out of its sails a bit. But yeah, for me, like Rogue Legacy, the first one, I think it's an all right game. I enjoyed it enough. I think for an early roguelike, it was pretty formative in that way for what is now a huge genre, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. I don't think I ever beat the game. But so I think it's just testament here of like how much they evolved the game here, both visually, just in terms of the scale of it, I would say. But for me, the thing that just kept surprising me about it was how many classes and how much variety is in there, where I would like, you get your classics, the archer, the mage, and just the basic warrior. And then you get something weird like a chef, and you're like, that's kind of funny. But then the chef's like really good and really interesting. Yeah. And then you like, I don't know, that kept happening until I got like 15 classes unlocked or something. Like, there's so much in here. What the heck? So that already just makes it enjoyable going through these levels over and over again, in that all these classes play very differently. And some of them will have strengths or weaknesses depending on which areas you're going to, which bosses you're trying to fight. So you can also kind of plan your route that way, but also you're dealing with the random draw of which one you were actually given in that way. Just so much progression here that you can kind of always like. There's still so much of that skill tree, whatever, that I have to level up. But as you're not supposed to do the whole thing before the game ends. You can have to pick what play style you want to go with the limited resources that you got. But yeah, I think one of the greatest evolutions that this game did from the first one, and it has been a long time since I played that first one, but to my memory, is that they made this a platformer as well. Like the first game obviously was a 2D platforming setup, but you didn't really feel like you were platforming. It was more about the combat and like going through these kind of Metroidvania-ish levels. But like they added so many things here, whether it's the air dash or double jumps or the kind of downwards attack where you bounce off of things. That just makes moving around super fun. And this game's controls are fantastic. So to have a really, really tight and really in-depth movement system mixed with great combat, mixed with great variety, like it just was always fun for me and kept me hooked for like a good few weeks as I was trying to beat this game because it too is very, very difficult. And, part of it is you can keep just going through and getting a better character, but you also got to learn these, patterns and stuff if you want to beat some of these bosses. I think the bosses are really well designed across the board. Another thing too is like kind of, this doesn't necessarily post game, but because you can kind of do it when you're still going through the main stuff, but there's all sorts of challenge levels that are super interesting where it's like, okay, do this boss again, but there's another boss in that room to it, or this boss but in a different arena that makes it a lot harder, or just like 3 of this one boss at the same time. And the fact that you're like actually able to do that because I've learned this boss so well at this point is super fun. And there's so many of those challenges too that are really well designed. Good like puzzles here in terms of figuring out secret areas I thought was interesting. There's a lot of that hidden stuff in there too, in kind of a Spelunky way. So obviously, love Spelunky, Game of the Year 2020. What else do I want to say about this game? I think it's just that combat to each class. One thing I really liked about the mastery element of it is each class and each weapon than each class has a way that you get a critical hit, right? It's not like there is random critical hits, but then they have some other term for it, but it's like with certain class, if you dash and then slash your sword at the exact right time, you'll get like a guaranteed
I didn't know that.
critical hit. And each weapon has a very different one, whether it's like the spacing of the attack or using it with a movement ability or comboing it in some way. So that was really fun too, of like figuring out what those are and then maximizing those so that you're pretty much always getting as many critical hits as you can. There is just so much to this game, and it's another one to me. I think is a bit of a bummer that it kind of went so far under the radar because it is amazing and truly one of the best roguelikes I've ever played, and I've played a lot of them. So yeah, I loved my time with Rogue Legacy 2, and there's still so much that I want to go back and do because, as I said, there's a lot of kind of bonus content to go back for.
That's been a game I've really enjoyed what I've played. I kind of told myself it was my Steam Deck game, so I've only been really playing it when I'm like out and about, or I'm kind of like sitting on the couch while my girlfriend's watching a movie or something like that. So I've been playing it very piecemeal, which I think isn't very fair to it. But well,
I think roguelikes are in many ways kind of designed for that. It's just, if you love a roguelike, obviously you're going to get hooked on it and play only that for a month. But it's almost like the best way to enjoy them is, I was playing Spelunky with my girlfriend last night. Like, it's just one of those games you always come back to. And I think Rogue Legacy 2 will be one of those for me where there is an ending. I did roll credits on it, but it is still one that I want to go back for. Whereas other roguelikes, when I get the first win, I'm like, okay, I'm good. And then I peace out. Even if I enjoyed the experience, like, okay, I think I got all out of it. But there's still so much to mine in Rogue Legacy 2. It's fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to get back into that one. I think I've gotten one boss down, so I've got plenty to go.
Yeah, that first boss is pretty difficult. I feel like there was a bit of a wall there, but then the game kind of opens up and I think gives you more freedom in terms of which zone you want to go to next and what you're capable of doing. So I think you'll maybe get to a point eventually where you're like, okay, this is really opened up here, and I'm kind of hitting the second echelon of what this game is doing, perhaps.
Exciting.
Yeah.
All right. What are we at now? This is 6. I was about to say we're damn near top 5 territory. It's getting there. Getting busy here. So my number 6 is Signalis. Little alliteration there for you. Signalis I've talked about at length already in a lot of the previous Game of the Year podcasts, but this one was another. I feel like my list is full of surprises this year in a way that I'm really happy to see. And Signalis just spoke to me in a way that I feel like few games did this year. Like, it just really kind of hit the nostalgia right, like the nail was right on the head. Or is that it? That's
yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Jeez. I was like, that doesn't sound right at all. Anyway, Signalis is just incredibly eerie. It has a perfect art style. It is framed as kind of like an old school PlayStation 1 survival horror game. So it really does play a lot like an improved version of like an original Resident Evil or like a Silent Hill, which I'm huge fans of both of those entire series. Like I will preach the gospel of both of those horror genres, or of both of those horror series. And Signalis does so much right that those games did right originally, and I feel like along the way survival horror lost. I think the things that people found to be scary were like they started leaning more on jump scares. They started leaning more on action combat, where this game has like a forced pacing that I think is just wonderful. The way that you're getting your story is by like reading logs and kind of just piecing things together and kind of having this like just genuine mystery slowly unravel as you play through the game. Really good at making sure that you're like feeling stressed out while you're solving these puzzles, because like you have to burn the enemies every time you walk by. So, or every time you run into them, if you don't have enough flares, or if you don't have like flame rounds, you're going to be in positions where these things are going to come back and get you again. And you start running out of ammo, and you end up having these stressful situations where you're running through a path of enemies that can like one shot you, and you're moving your way through. But then there's also some really smart puzzle mechanics throughout this game. There is this radio system that you have that offers a lot of different varieties of puzzles. Sometimes there's enemies that are weak to a certain frequency, and the frequency will pop up on the screen.
That's really cool.
And it'll shift constantly, and you're constantly going back in your menu and changing the radio signal. There's pieces where I think I mentioned this in I don't remember which podcast I mentioned it in, but there's one of the puzzles where you have this this microphone that you can play the radio into, and it creates this different visual, and each visual goes with a door. So it'll be like a diamond or a triangle or a square, and it'll actually give you the password to the different doors. So you have to go through and use these different, figure out what the right frequency is, and then go to the microphone, get the right shape, and then bring that the information you receive from that back over to the door to unlock the doors. It's a game that makes you like, I think has really solid survival horror puzzles. They don't become frustrating. I feel like that's a fine line to walk in survival horror games, because you are running out of resources so quickly that if you're doing all this back and forth running, trying to solve a puzzle, it can just start to piss you off. Where this is like the perfect mix of giving you something where you have this aha moment, but also feeling like, okay, I figured this out and now I can go handle shit, instead of feeling like, oh my God, now I have to make my way back through this whole level that I figured this out and probably die over and over again. I feel like the way that the story is told is really cool. It mixes a bunch of different art styles in an interesting way. Like it has this pixel layer to it, but occasionally it'll shift to first person. That in like these parts that sometimes it just shifts to first person when you're like climbing through a tunnel, but sometimes it shifts to like this cutscene format that is almost like slightly anime, but still with this kind of like pixel art. And then there's times when you end up on this beach where you're picking up notes, and it is just like this straight up like first person adventure game style. You're just like walking. It's like walking simulator-esque, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, and it mixes up its gameplay often enough to keep it engaging. Because I think if it was just like kill the enemies, make it from A to B, this would be like an incredibly boring game. But it just does so many good things that it takes so many good things from survival horror throughout the years, and really does make this wonderfully nostalgic experience. And the fact that there's 4 endings, I believe, and every single time you restart the game, it really changes everything. It feels like Nier, or the Nier series in that regard, where you really do need to play it through 4 times to get the entire story, and it doesn't just feed you the same game 99% of the way, and then the ending's different. Like, you are playing the game completely differently from start to finish. I mentioned this in a previous podcast too, but I think the best example of that is you start the game on a crash landed ship in your first playthrough, and on the second playthrough, the ship is still in space. So you get to see different pieces of that story, and kind of how your main character is slowly slipping into some kind of mental health issues, some degradation, and it handles that stuff really well too. It's not, I feel like a lot of times games try to slip into mental health and it gets super problematic, whereas this one doesn't at all. I think it handles it really well, and really interestingly, similarly to the way that, like, I guess the Silent Hill series does. Say it's more Silent Hill than Resident Evil. If that's your bag. For me, the best horror game of the year.
Love it. What's the second best horror game of the year?
It's been I was about to say, not Callisto Protocol.
I'm like, I don't know if there's a ton, but
there weren't a lot.
It
It was an easy year, but like I put this up against. I don't know. I'm gonna make some enemies here, but like I put this up against like RE8 last year. Like I like this is one of my favorite horror games in years. I'll put it there. Like it is. It goes up against some of the strong ones over the last 5 years.
I mean, the sound design alone makes this game terrifying. When you're walking through a hallway, you can't see anything, and then you hear that sound. I made it sound goofy, but it is truly terrifying. My number 6 is going to be a game that I love, and I'm one of the very few who's going to have this on their top 10 in the year of 2022, but Weird West. This game is 1000% my jam, in that it's got that kind of immersive sim DNA, of course, from the various Arcane studio people that are making this game. Deathloop was my game of the year last year. But yeah, it's just that player freedom is... That's the label I'd put on this game. Player freedom. You can do whatever the fuck you want in this game, and I think that where this game, because of its scale and maybe the easier time they would have like with assets for creating new characters and stuff, they are able to really do that on the story side of things, where it truly is like you can just kill anyone you want, and then the story will somehow go on in some way, and you can get to the ending. And there are a couple characters that's like, fuck this person, and I ended up just killing them, and then the story kind of adapts and comes up with these new ways in which you can go through it, which I think is very cool. But yeah, I think one thing that is super smart about this game is that you have these 5 separate characters that you're playing through the game with. They each kind of have like their own start, stop, ending, and then you can do as much side quest. You could spend 20 hours on each character if you want to, or you can blast through each one to try and get to the next area. But each one of those really incentivizes you to play the game in different ways. That's one of the maybe issues with immersive sim games sometimes, is you kind of get stuck in one playstyle and you want to keep going with that. But because of these different characters, you're kind of incentivized to do that kind of stuff. So there was at one point for like 5 or 6 hours, I was like, you know what? I just kind of want to roleplay as a bank robber for a bit. So I just went town to town, and I was just heisting out these towns, just robbing as much as I could, not making any sort of story progression in any sort of way. But I was like, I just want to do that for a bit. It's very kind of a Bethesda thing. I'll just play a random character in Morrowind or Oblivion like that. And I think this game was actually able to do that in kind of a fun Western setting, which is, I don't know, I feel like a very rare setting in video games. Obviously got Red Dead, but I don't know. I feel like in terms of open, like, Western games, I don't know if there's tons of them, so I think that was a lot of fun for me. We talked about this a lot last year, where Deathloop has a kick, and it's just like the funnest thing ever to kick enemies around. And this game has that exact same kick, and I love it. I just want every game needs a kick like this, where you just launch enemies. And then there's even a power in this game for one of the characters that has like increased power on their kicks, so they can just fucking launch people too, which is so much fun. I think it has a really great immersive sim ending because of that freedom, as I was talking about. Like, truly each of your actions can be factored in a way, and you're kind of being judged for what you've done in a way that I think is pretty captivating here. Of course, immersive sims, it's kind of all about everything being interactable. I think that was definitely the case here, where, I don't know, just like if you want to heist out a building, you can just set up a series of boxes and climb on these boxes to climb on other roofs to get on top, to sneak through the chimney, whatever it may be, just blow up things, or, shoot out lights, things like that, piles of toxic gas or explosive, whatever it is. Like, there's just so much fun stuff to do in this game. And I just have, if I think back to my time, there's so many memorable moments of this one sequence where I had to save this character, and I went into this town, and he was essentially put in one of those things that like traps your head in it, like a torture device, whatever that was called. He's like in the middle of the town, and there's like probably 10, 15 NPCs that are all just, some are watching, some are, the guards watching them, and other people are just like, okay, they're just walking to and from their house, whatever it is. And I just spent like hours just slowly sleuthing out this town, just like baiting someone around this side of this house so I could knock him out, put him in a bush, or this person walked into the building, so then I went into the building, knock him out. And I just, throughout all this process, I was like knocking out all these different people. And then all the guards, I got to this point where they kind of have this triangulation where they're all all looking directly at him. So you can't really knock out any one of them without the other one seeing. So I just, one by one, would like interact with them so that they would turn around and talk to me, so that they were all then facing outwards. And then I could go sneak on the inside and like stealth knock out each and every one of them. And like, I don't know, that could have been a combat puzzle if I wanted to. I could just like fight my way through it. But instead I did this like really roundabout way of going about it. So many funny memories of just throwing a dynamite in a house and just like seeing the chaos that ensues. So much fun stuff. Like, a couple moments where you have to go like loot something off of a person. So I went in and shit went south and ended up being this massive combat scenario. And at some point I just like, I killed the guy, did all this stuff, whatever. The dust falls. I leave the city, go turn in the quest. I'm like, shit, I never actually picked up the thing that I needed to do because there was like a million bodies everywhere. So I go back to the town, and then like they've moved the bodies into some graves. They've been buried into the ground, so you can go and just grave rob. But then there might be the situation where there's like a random event that occurs where everyone just turns into a zombie. So then now this graveyard just ends up being this other combat scenario where there's just 100 zombies walking around this town because you killed everyone. I don't know. It's just such a fun, goofy, weird game that is so over the top and silly and just lets you do whatever you want in this fun Western world. And just, I love the world map too. You can cruise around, do whatever you want. So I pretty much love every single thing about this game. I think for a lot of people, the controls are kind of wonky at first and it turned them off of it, which I think is totally fair. But if you spend the time with it, there's a lot there for, you have to truly want to be creative. And I think this game actually does a good job of, sometimes immersive sims give you so many options that you don't know what to do, so you end up just not doing anything interesting. You end up playing like a pretty vanilla game. It's like, all these things are here, but I didn't really know how to interact with them. But I think Weird West, at least for me who's into this genre, really let me go wild with that kind of stuff. So I think that's pretty much it, man. I love this game from start to finish, and I'm so happy that this studio exists, kind of a smaller indie version of Arcane, and I cannot wait to see what they do next. I hope that they found some success with this. I know it was on Game Pass. Hopefully that helped them get some money in the bank. And I don't know. I just really want them to keep making weird little games like this, which I say little. It took like 40, 50 hours to get through this thing, to see the credits at the end. Like, it is still a massive game for what it is. So yeah, Weird West. Love it.
That's one that really grew on me. I know when I first started playing it, I was really relating it to a lot of CRPGs, and I was like, man, this is doing so many things different. Like, this isn't making a lot of sense to me. And then it clicked that that's not what this game is. It is a CRPG style, or like in visuals, it looks a lot like a CRPG. But when you get down to like brass tacks, it is much more of that like immersive sim. And the second I realized I could start chucking people out of windows and shit, I was like, okay, this game is way more fun than I thought it was. It kind of buried the lead there a little bit for me, but I ended up really enjoying that game as well. One that I definitely intend to finish and see all the way through. I'm about halfway.
I heard that there's mod support for it now, and apparently there's just like a first-person mode that someone has made, so you can just play this game in first person. So I imagine that is quite janky, but I want to go back and check out some of these mods. I didn't realize that was a thing. I just heard about it a couple days ago, so I want to definitely jump back into Weird West. And I don't know actually what the New Game Plus experience is like. It'd be fun if you could just kind of pick which character you want to play as and go through there, but I don't know how it works. But anyway, check out Weird West, everyone. Very under the radar game. I don't know if it's still on Game Pass. It probably, usually the game's been on there for a full year, so it should still be on there. Go check it out. Dante, we're getting into the big five here.
I was about to say, we're here, man. This is these are the best of the best, at least.
So let's then take our another break here before we get into this top five. Give us a moment to catch our breath before we get into this next set of games. Okay, we are back. Top five time, baby. Dante, what do you got in the number 5 slot?
Let's get into JRPG land a little bit.
Okay.
I think a lot of people might know where I'm going with this one. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is one of those spectacular JRPG experiences that I usually look for at least one of those every year, and this is one of the best I've had in years. I talked about it throughout the year on this podcast that I went through and played through all of the Xenoblade games for the first time. I know Dylan was like, hey, you're going to get into Xenoblade Chronicles 3? And I'm like, I bounced off of all those games. I don't think so. And then felt like I just did myself a disservice somewhere along the way and played through the Switch version or definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. somehow now that is like one of my favorite JRPGs ever.
Amazing. Love
like the big switch there, man. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is not as good as 1, but it's still a good game. It has some problems, and most of them are how it handles female characters.
Okay.
And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 fixes a lot of that, and I think all of the
Hey,
characters in this
nice.
game are phenomenal. I think what Xenoblade Chronicles does really well is its combat system is, in general, like across all 3 games, is excellent, and this just takes everything that they've done well over the last few years and expands upon that. So I'm a big fan of, like, one of my favorite RPGs of all time is Final Fantasy 12 specifically, because it does have this almost it's like nearly MMO combat but faster, but it's like very methodical, not quite turn-based combat. It's more of like an active time system, so you like wait for an ability to recharge and then you use that, so everything's kind of on like a, I don't know, like 15-second delay between attacks you can use, so you're like thinking about which order to use attacks in. Xenoblade Chronicle 3 does that, but like makes it so fast, it is insane. Like, you always have attacks to use, you can switch between all of your characters on the fly, like you can always be doing something in this game. And then additionally, the story is a lot more serious than 2 was, and that was one of my favorite parts about 1, is kind of just the stakes of that story, and Shulk dealing with so many different traumatic experiences, and the fact that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is about a group of kind of military children, essentially, like these kids who are raised as pieces of this military, and then you realize very soon that they're a part of a futile like fight just to make them kill each other over and over again, because that's the world's fuel. Ends up creating this like really, really dynamic just like storytelling device where like there are really high stakes, and all of these people have skin in the game for different reasons. All these characters only get to live for 10 years, so some of those are closer to the 10-year mark than others. I spoke about this a little bit in the characters section, and that also raises stakes for some characters, where like some of these things that they plan on doing sound just too far out for them to be a part of, which is really difficult for these characters to handle. The world is huge. It is huge. It is really insane that this game is on the Switch. It definitely makes the Switch feel like it's on its last leg sometimes, but it also just surprised me a million different times that this was able to be done on a system like this. It is got a sprawling open world. It kind of segments the open world into some sections, but every single area is massive, and you can kind of go anywhere. You can kind of roam around at your leisure. It does kind of do some like Metroidvania stuff where it locks you away from using zip lines, so you can't get to like some areas right from the get-go. But if people love that like Breath of the Wild experience, like this is the team that helped them make that world, and it that really shows. It is one of the best RPG open worlds in ages, if not maybe the best. And yeah, just like the power fantasy that this game allows for is also just like excellent. It has a really, really cool job system, which I'm always a big fan of, like as a fan of like Final Fantasy Tactics and kind of like the early Final Fantasy games, like 3 and 5 also have some pretty cool job systems. This is one of the neatest. You essentially have characters kind of unlock jobs as they go through different side quests and different storylines. Every job is super different from the previous. Like they kind of fall into strict archetypes that you've experienced in other RPGs, but the way that they go about them is pretty different. Like it's not just like an archer, right? It's not just a barbarian. Like they make the tanks really neat and like futuristic and kind of take a different spin on them. But the way that you level up those is obviously just like by playing that job for a while. But if you have that job, or if you have multiple of the same job in your class or in your party, then everybody's going to level up that job a little bit faster. It really does push you into some situations where you end up having some like really wacky team like setups. Like you might have an all tank team, or you could have like all DPS and really kind of all healers and be practically invincible, but do no damage and make fights take fucking forever.
That doesn't sound super fun. I don't know about that one.
Yeah, but there are some healers that are more DPS focused. So like you actually,
well, it's cool that you even have that option to play it that way if you want to.
Tons of classes, tons of little side characters. The sub quest or the side quest system is super fun. You can ignore it entirely, but the side quests are great. Immaculate voice acting. It is one of the best RPGs I've played in ages. Like it is truly kind of rising to the top of those JRPG greats. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is one of the better ones in a long time. And I'm sad to say that because this thing is like 150 hours long, still haven't beaten it. But I'm quite close, and I think that the story's going some really cool places. And I do think if you are looking to get into a Xenoblade game, I would still start with the first one, the definitive edition of the first one, because while it does not seem like they're ultimately tied together at first glance, as you get into like the last acts of these games, they start to like there's a thread between them that is cool. Pretty interesting, and I think worth seeing the full story of if you're invested in that sort of thing.
I love it. I'm so glad that we got some Xenoblade love on the podcast. I felt like that was a bit of a hole in the summer. I'm like, man, I really want to cover this game, but it's hard for me to dive into this one, but I'm glad you could. Number 5 for me, into the top 5 here. This is a Marvel game that came out in the last 3 months that has microtransactions, that is turn-based, and has cards. There's still 2 games I could be talking about here, but this is going to be our first game in common, Marvel's Midnight Suns.
Let's
cracking into my top 5. And yeah, as we were just talking about, like I have not beat this game yet, but I think, Xenoblade, here's another good example where I almost think it's more impressive when a game is cracking into a top 10 or even like this high when you haven't completed yet. And I think I don't really need to repeat what you were saying about the tactics gameplay here. Like this is so close to that Into the Breach style for me, but obviously adds a bunch of different layers. But I really like that kind of smaller scale tactics where you just have 3 units, but there's so much more depth provided on that and moving units around. And I love the addition of the goons. I think is a really I like interesting concept that I've never seen in a tactics game before. And even just out of like every little thing where it's like, okay, I had to like add a redraw mechanic in here so you can flesh out cards because of how many you're getting. But then they go so far with that. We're like, okay, we're gonna make Iron Man's moveset like all about using these redraws, so it takes away this other resource. Or every other character can get like bonuses on their cards that if you redraw, you'll get some other bonus. So I think like, okay, we'll just take this redraw mechanic and make that super interesting. And then movement is the same thing. Where like that's a very limited resource. And then you can eventually get ways that like your movement can turn to like you can cure a teammate, or you can push an enemy, or you can push them into one of your friendlies and get a bonus card. And it's like, how am I going to use that one limited movement I get each turn? Like now that is such a valuable thing. So I don't know. I think just across the board on the tactics side of things, just blowing me away in terms of how innovative this game is, how fun it is, how puzzle-like it feels, and how well they're able to match each character's moveset. Truly feels like a completely unique class, and each time you unlock, like there's not a single character in this game that I'd say has a weak design or boring design or uninteresting or isn't fitting for who that character is and what their powers are. Like they just nailed it, and that's why I cannot wait for these 4 DLC characters. I haven't even gotten Hulk yet, but like, man, each character is so fucking good that I cannot wait for each, like Morbius, whatever, Deadpool, even on paper, I'm not too into that character necessarily, I guess, for the like gameplay of it, but I cannot wait to see what those movesets are, because I'm sure it's gonna maybe introduce some new mechanics or even just use what's in the game already in new and interesting ways. And I think for me, what probably rises this game up, and for you it's in 10, for me it's double that, is because I also do really like the character element of it. Like I love the dialogue between the characters. I think the overarching story is maybe the least interesting part, and it's mostly just because like for how much plot has actually happened relative to how much time you've spent, like that ratio is way off, or there's not a
Yeah.
ton of story twists, or like not even a ton of big villains in there. Like they're reusing the same ones over and over again, which once again, mechanically, totally okay with it. But I think story wise, it ends up feeling like, okay, I've spent so much time just like on this next leg of the journey where it's like I'm just trying to save Scarlet Witch, and that feels like that takes like 10 hours, which adds like maybe some stakes to it, and it takes time to get there. But anyway, I'm still enough. I'm liking it. It's just not elevating the experience. But for me, it's those zooming in on those character interactions, the dialogue between them, the little story details that aren't that related to the overarching plot, but just like individual issues that each character has is great. Whether it's like Blading and he has like a little crush on Captain Marvel, and this spins off into like this whole book club storyline. Like I love that. It's so cute. It's so much fun. I think the progression in this game is fantastic. Another thing too is like the mechanics are so sound that they're able to add these extra like puzzle levels. Like every kind of encounter is sort of like a puzzle, but then they have those bonus challenges that you can do to get the Midnight Sun costume for each characters, which is just like essentially like that is a puzzle where you have to specifically use this move in this angle to like knock back into that enemy to get this card to do all this stuff. And like those puzzles are really engaging because like those core mechanics are so well done that those are really fun to go through. I think the visuals kind of lacking in this game, but the voice acting I think is fantastic across the board. Whether they're people who are trying to do their best MCU version or not, I think they are like this guy sounds like a great Robert Downey. He's doing that same kind of thing, but it's still a really good performance in its own way. And then other characters, kind of bringing other characters like Nico, Magic we talked about in characters. I don't really know anything about them, but I love these characters now. Like these are some of my favorite Marvel characters. Like so interesting. I love their backstory and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm loving Midnight Suns. I feel like I'm still playing it like every night because I really want to get Hulk. I really want to see that last move set, and then I might cool off on a bit. I think once I get Hulk, I'm probably pretty close to rolling credits. I'm curious what kind of post-game content stuff there is, or if I'm just coming back for the DLC. I'm not sure, but goddamn, I love like everything about this game. I'm so into it. I expected I was gonna like it. I did not think I would love it as much as I did. They're blowing me away in that way.
Likewise, night after night, like getting closer to beating that game, I wouldn't be surprised if it like starts to slide its way up and we talk next year and you're like, where does Midnight Suns land? And I might say like 3 slots higher than it actually is. But like the fact that it cracked top 10 out of really nowhere was a nice treat. And talking about the new characters coming out, like I can't remember a game that I saw a season pass for and then I was like, yeah, I'm not going to get that. And then like 15 hours in, I'm like, I'm definitely getting this.
Yeah,
so it got my money twice.
I love it.
All right, top 4.
Top 4. Let's do it.
This will be an easy one to talk about because I talked about this like crazy already, and then we've already talked about it together today. So another one that we both have on our list, Neon White.
Love
Neon
it.
White is just as you said, just a fucking chef's kiss of core game mechanics, man. It is so fun. It is just so fun. Like I can't remember a game in that in ages where I just like literally my palms are sweating playing this game. I am like not blinking for entire periods of time. Like it just has me more engaged than a lot of games typically do. And just trying to get those like just racing for that top time is super fun. And I think all the things in between are also done extremely well. It doesn't spend too much time on these, but like you do have a fun cast of characters you get to joke around with and kind of like learn more about as you get into the side quests that you unlocked by picking up the collectibles within the levels. Which also the collectibles done in the levels are also really smart because they do push you to think about the way that you're using the weapon types entirely differently. Like the fact that one of them, like I know we've both kind of said the rocket launcher is probably the weakest of the weapon types, but the fact that you like there's like presents, which are the collectibles, like, or I guess there are a few different things. There's presents. There's they always look like presents, but they when you open them up, they're different things. Like it might be beer for one guy. It's like a stuffed animal for one. It's cigars for another guy. But regardless, like one of my favorite examples of like just this making me think about the cards a little differently, which is how you utilize the weapons, is one where like there's a treasure all the way at the top of this tower, and you're just like find your way through the level and try and collect as many rockets as humanly possible. And then you have like 30 rockets, which is an absurd amount. It's like more than you usually do have at any point throughout a level. And you were just rocket jumping over and over and over and over and over and over again, to the point that you're like way above the rest of the level, and there's just this treasure right at the top of it. It does so many cool things to make you think about the cards differently, and that does lean into like getting those better times down the road. But then once you do get those presents, you bring them over to your fun cast of characters, and you are slowly unlocking, like in Persona, like their social link goes up. And then the second it reaches a point, you either get really interesting dialogue that tells you about their history, because everyone knows about White except for White, which is kind of this interesting mystery that like everybody feels a certain way about him in a way that makes a lot of sense why they're not telling him what's going on. As you slowly move through the level, you realize that they all have kind of their different relationships with him, and there's a reason why they're not giving him the full story. But then there's also these side quests that have very strict rules. It's just about getting from point A to point B, and it once again makes you think about like specific weapon types totally differently. Some of the side quests are some of my favorite levels in the entire game. It just does a really good job of balancing out gameplay and kind of breaking up the pacing a little bit. I think this is one of the better examples of that, where I feel like, once again, if it was just like all levels all the time, it could have been that and it still would have been an excellent game. But every once in a while, you do need that breather, especially because it is such a try hard ass game if you let it. So like it gets to the point where you've done a level so many times in a row, you're just like, I just need to take a breath. And what you get to do in those moments where you get to take a breath is actually, like, I think really enjoyable. Nothing extravagant, nothing really crazy, but like the side quest levels are maybe a little simpler, or you're doing just like one thing, and you don't have to think about using 8 different cards in that same level. It's just like, all right, I can focus here. And I just think it is excellent on so many fronts. The voice acting is amazing. The music is worth listening to outside of the game, made by one of my favorite electronic artists. Like, that was a huge surprise to me. I remember thinking that it sounded like Machine Girl, and then my girlfriend was like, "Oh, did you know that Machine Girl did the music for this?" And I was like, I never looked it up for some reason, but I was like, of course they did. It's just one of those things that, like, feels like a game made for me. The shooting is like Quake or like Counter-Strike at sometimes, which is like a very nostalgic feeling for me. And then on top of that, having music that's incredible, having an art style I really like, having voice acting by like people from anime that I've enjoyed as a child. Like, the fact that the main character from Cowboy Bebop does the main vocal, or does the main voice acting, is like, I don't know. It's just
that's cool.
Checks every cool box for me. Like, this is a cool thing in a video game. It does all of it. It's an absolute blast. And if you like shooting games, if you like platformers, if you like speed running, this is literally one of the best of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Next for me, and actually, I feel like we never really explicitly mentioned like a spoiler warning, but for this next game, I do want to talk about some very specific things, and that is my boy Tunic. Tunic. So this is one that on the surface, and you watch the trailers, and then you play it for 5 or 6 hours. It's like, okay, this is a kind of Zelda-like game. Immediately has like the best soundtrack of the year. No shade on Neon White, because I also love that soundtrack. But Tunic, oh my god, that is next level. Visually too, like immediately just one of the cutest, but also kind of dreamy and daisy sort of aesthetic. Looks great. And in terms of that like basic Zelda-like structure, it's solid. It's got, you're unlocking new weapons, it's getting more complex and all that. But it's later on in the game when things change, right? And it has that kind of Witness-like moment where you realize that there's just all these visual puzzles that are all over the world that you could have interacted with from 5 seconds into the game, but you just weren't looking at it right. You didn't know to hit this particular button combo or something like that. But when that happens, that just totally reframes this really like what is already a very well designed and well connected, intricate level design of these different areas. Now you're looking at it totally differently. You're looking at symbols on the walls. You're looking at a poster in a room. You're looking at just the way the land is kind of snake-like. You're like, that's a bit suspicious. I wonder if that's one of these things too. And just like solving these, and whether that's used as like a shortcut or it's like a bonus thing that you're unlocking in that moment, whatever it may be. But then once again, that moment happens again when you're unlocking the pamphlet, the player's manual, which love the aesthetics of that too, right? Because they kind of made it in real life and then like whatever, like scanned it so that it has that very kind of, it has that texture to it, but then they also put like the kind of tunic like effects over it, so it just looks really interesting. But then you're realizing that's such an interesting way to do a tutorial where you're just getting the pages of a manual, and you're getting more and more of those, and then eventually that's where you get a map, is because the map is just a page in this manual, and then you're getting more complex things. You're getting things that you don't really understand what they are. They're kind of implication on the story through some interesting illustration. But then the moment kind of, for me, because there's an ending, but then there's another quote-unquote true ending, right? The golden path. And when you realize that, like, there's a lot of weird little yellow lines in this manual, and then you go through many pages and you're like, a lot of pages have this, and realizing that it's just this intricate web across like 30 pages drawing this really specific line, and then you got to input that very neon white, like, okay, I learned the pattern, now I got to like do the text skill to get this very specific pattern. And man, my house was like looking like a conspiracy theorist. Like I had just pages, just paper everywhere, like graph paper, drawing things out. My scissors, I'm like cutting things out, putting them next to each other, rearrange them, trying to figure out how things click together. Like just solving the puzzles in this game, particularly that golden loop, but all the other ones as well. Like just some of the best puzzle design of all time for me. All time great design in that way. I love everything about Tunic. I think maybe the weakest part for me is like the combat, which I think is just fine, just okay. But at the same time, like there's an option in the menu to just like turn on God mode essentially, and there was a couple boss fights I was really struggling with. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll just put on God mode. I don't really like care to get the timing down on these parries and stuff. Like that's not what I'm here for. And so it's cool like that the game had an option for me to just be able to disengage from the element of the game that I wasn't totally jiving with, so I was able to fully love the experience. So yeah, I mean, we talked about in level design too, but just the hidden routes that are just, once again, hidden in plain sight. They're immediately there for you at all times. You just didn't really know to look in these particular places. Just a fucking amazing game. And I thought at surface, I was like, okay, I like Zelda, this kind of top-down Zelda games. I like those enough. So I'm sure I'll like this. But like, wow, this game had various moments where, yeah, even just like holding the space bar was like a huge revelation for me. Like, holy shit, I could have done this the whole time, and it like unlocks all this crazy like locations that I hadn't been to before. So a game that is constantly surprising you over and over and over again.
I did forget that there's like multiple moments through the game where it just like unlocks mechanics that you just have the entire game.
Yeah, not even unlocking them. You're just becoming aware of them.
Yeah. Man, I love that. That it reminds me a lot of one of my favorite games of all time. Like top 3 is The Witness. And just games that make you pull out a manual or pull out a notebook and start like scribbling like a crazy person always end up sneaking up like much higher. I wish I had to interact with some of that stuff more in Tunic, and I wish that I did. It kind of makes me want to go back and kind of go for that the golden path, because I kind of beat the game and walked away from it, and I realized there's probably so much more to it than I even realized.
God, it's fucking amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that too, because like I referenced the Witness in terms of the way it opens up. I never figured that out when I was playing the Witness. I never figured out that you can interact with the world stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I like bounced off the game, like, oh, I like these puzzles enough, but like they're getting kind of hard and whatever. Like it's an interesting game. And then like years later, just like was watching a video where they was talking about this. I'm like, wow, that is really cool. And if I had that moment, I'm sure I would be with everyone else that this is like an all-time great. But I just never saw it, and then didn't spend enough time with the game, didn't interact with it. So like, yeah, Tunic, like I was not expecting it to have that moment in it, but yeah, so now I know why people love The Witness now, because I got that experience through Tunic, and that was very kind of unexpected. So, and once again, like just go through the trailers now. It's like, man, they are showing so much here, but you just don't realize it.
That is incredible. Yeah, that is something I got to check off my list. At least I was about to say by the end of the year, or early next year, is kind of going through that golden path. That sounds, like I said, The Witness is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's because of moments like that. It's
a great twist on the ending too, in terms of the narrative of it, which I don't feel the need to spoil that element of it, but it for me gave me much better closure for the game too, where I was like, okay, this is an all-time great now. Yeah.
All right, top three, man.
The bronze medal. Where's it going?
Yeah, right. So,
well, I guess this is neon white. Bronze would be 4th place, right? Because you got the ace medal.
Yeah. So, Vampire Survivors, man. Oh,
okay,
my
top
God.
3. Wow.
Oh my God, I love this game. This was one of those that I was just like, what is this simple ass game? Who cares? Like, all right, so to paint a picture here once again, imagine a dual joystick shooter where you're just kind of like moving your character around, shooting enemies around it, but then you remove the second stick, and then all you have is the character movement and picking up items. It is the simplest game I have played in forever. It is literally just move the joystick. But there is so much complexity built into this game that I do not understand how this person just like captured lightning in a bottle like this. It is so much fun. So you get to there. I think the entire premise here is like you're trying to make it through 30 minutes in a level. And it's a roguelike as well. So you are picking up different items, and you get more item unlocks as you go through the game. You get different character unlocks as you go through the game, and it really does change up the gameplay a ton. But the part that is I think really surprising to me is like there's this combination of different items that start to evolve the items that you're using that end up creating like these super powered weapons. And you can start combining multiple of those super powered weapons to the point that you are wiping entire screens worth of enemies. It gets to the point where all you have is like different versions of pixelated enemies coming at you from all different sides. And over time, you will ultimately get overwhelmed. And then in between each level, you've picked up cash. You get an opportunity to improve, whether it be the cooldowns on your weapons, or your health regeneration, or just general damage. And then it gets into some crazy things like you can start spending money to make the game harder. You can make it so that you get more money, and then you're using that same money also to unlock new characters, which all have different starting weapons. They have different perks. So like some move faster than others. Some start with special weapons that you can't select, like you can't pick up throughout the missions. I'm trying to think. Some of them do some like absolutely wild stuff. Some have increased range, like effect range. It's just like every single character has its own thing that it is really strong at, and then some of them have some serious weaknesses too. Like the one that has increased range moves incredibly slow. So you just have this like super strong variety between not just the amount of weapons you can pick up. There's dozens of weapons in this game. Like it gets to the point where like you just start off with a whip, and it is like, all right, I'm just like moving my character around. He's automatically whipping, and then you upgrade the whip, and now it whips in front of you and behind you, and then you get to the point where there's you get the hollow heart, which increases your health, but then you realize that passive and that main weapon combine and evolve once you've maxed out the whip, and it now does leech damage. So you're working your way through trying to and then later on you get another whip, and you can combine the two whips after you've upgraded them both, and it just keeps snowballing like that over and over and over again, to the point that you get to a point where you have maxed out every single weapon on your bar, every single passive on your bar, and your character is just a monster. And it is one of the better like power fantasies that I've experienced. But like I think where this game truly shines is how just like pick up and play it is. Like I have not had a game that I've just been like, oh, I got 20 minutes, let me just kill some time real quick, like this one. And to the point that I have, like I said, to beat the game takes 20 minutes or it takes 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But I have put in, where you at? Vampire Survivors? I have played this game for 60 hours this year. So it really is just playing it in these small chunks of time. I'll play it for 20 minutes here. I'll play it for 30 minutes here. Like I'll play for an hour because I got like 28 minutes into a run. And then I was like, no, because you just get so close to winning and then you want to start over again. The way that you do unlocks is incredibly fun little micro challenges within the game. So one of my favorite ones is you have to pick up item. You have to have the clock, which is one of the items that like freeze enemies. And then you have to pick up a weapon on one side of, or a passive item on one side of the map, and then one on the opposite end of the map. And if you're moving too much, you're not picking up enough experience, you're not picking up money, you're not going to level up fast. So you have to be really methodical in the way that you move through that level and make sure you pick up both. And then not just pick them both up, but then also raise them up to max, and then unlock that kind of like new weapon type. And then that new weapon type unlocks a character. And once again, you just end up in the snowball effect again. It's just got a carrot on a stick that like is an absolute blast. Like you're just constantly unlocking stuff. This was a game that was in early access early in the year. And it was, it felt like one of those perfect episodic situations as well. Like I would get all the achievements, and then they would do a patch and they would add like 10 more. And I would be like, all right, cool. I have 10 more things to do now. And it just kept like spoon feeding me throughout the year. Just
dropped a new one too, like days ago, right?
Yeah. They actually added their first like paid DLC, which paid DLC is kind of funny for a game that I should mention is $2.
Yeah.
This game is, well, originally it was. I don't know if they upped the price after. Okay, it's $5 now, but it was originally $2.
Yeah.
They realized how successful that game was, started adding a lot of content. Like, it has had an overwhelmingly positive.
Or if you want to save that $2, go play it on Game Pass, because they're
right. And now it's on Game Pass. It's on iPhone and Android now. Like this game is literally everywhere. It is one of those games that is truly just so simple, but done so perfectly that it kind of surprises you that like looking up at games that have been just got beautiful visuals and incredible music and like gameplay that probably took these people years and years and years to work on. This guy probably made this in 6 months, and it is, as far as I'm concerned, a 10 out of 10. Like they truly created something amazing with this, and to the point that they found so many copycat games within the first like 2 months. People were just like churning out versions of this game, and I don't think a single one even got close to being as good as this is. It's kind of magic. It's really bizarre that something so dumb and simple, you look at a trailer for it, you're like, this looks like garbage. And it's phenomenal. It's just so fun. It's just so fun, and it really does trigger that one more game thing in me.
Yeah,
in a way that...
I have a question. So, like, as you're unlocking more characters, it's like each character kind of has like a new weapon type that I get it unlocks once you do like a challenge with them. I think is usually how it goes, right? Like, does that make it harder to get those evos because you're like now there's more things in the pool that are taking your chances down of like getting more whips? And is that like, I don't know, does that ruin the experience or does that make it better? Like, I'm curious how that factors into it, because I don't think I've gotten quite far enough for that to feel like that's stopping me from getting evos most of the time.
Yeah, no, because they built in a really smart mechanic to fix that. If I think this would be a problem. I think it does kind of smartly feed you items. Like if you have a whip, it's like, all right, we're going to give you a hollow heart at some point. Like we're not.
Okay,
just
it's not truly random. Like if you, okay.
I think, but it may be like either that or the randomization is like really consistent. Like
or you just might have a good run versus a bad run.
Yeah, but also there is something built into the system that truly helps you avoid that. There's skips and banishes.
Right.
So eventually you get to a point where you can get an upgrade, and you're like, all right, all these three I don't think are really going to work for my build. I only have, I think, 10 slots. I have 5 main weapons and 5 passives. So maybe it's 6. But and if I pick up this item, I'm not going to have room to upgrade one of my weapons. So I can skip them, or you can entirely banish specific things. You're like, I'm never going to use this in my run. make it so I never see this item ever again throughout the rest of my run. So it does kind of reduce the pool and allows you to see something you are looking for. I've gotten to the point now where I feel like most of the time when I'm building towards something, it is very rare that I'm not getting it. I'd say occasionally there might be like 1 or 2 weapons that don't get the evolution I'm looking for. But most of the time I'm getting what I'm looking for at this point. And I almost always finish a level at this point. At first, it's like a real serious challenge to even pass the first level. And then you get so many of those upgrades like you do in like Rogue Legacy or something like that, where you're slowly building up your character. They have more health. They have more damage. It starts to feel like an absolute slaughter fest. It's super fun.
Yeah.
Vampire Survivors, best $2 I've ever spent on a video game. Easily. But even for $5, I think it's an absolute steal.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, my number 3 is going to be Elden Ring. Yeah, I mean, I think most of the conversation around this game has been that open world games are getting kind of stale, and then Elden Ring comes through here and like totally revitalizes it. And I think for me, that's the element I like about it the most, for sure, is I've played so many open worlds, and I think the way this one is not just stuffing random like icons at you everywhere, but instead just making you intrigued by like seeing something in the distance that looks captivating, is the way you're getting brought around that way. It's the scale and the size of it. It's the way that you don't truly understand the scale, and you have this moment where it expands, and that happens multiple times over, whether that's like going upwards, you keep going up and up and up in this game, or getting teleported to some random location that is then like, wow, I've never been anywhere like this before. Maybe you'll discover it like hours and hours down the road. Or I think for me too is the underground, because obviously there's the Siofra River we talked about in the levels category, but there's also like the deep root depths, and then that keeps going down. You pop out down the other side of the snow area and go up to the Halig tree and all this stuff. Like, I don't know, just a never-ending supply of unique areas that you go to. And once again, like they hide a lot of it so that you're not going to find it immediately, but then it just makes the game like overwhelming in a way, because you just keep discovering these new areas over and over again. I think I've had a very tumultuous road when it comes to Souls games, where I love Dark Souls 3, but that's very much a time and a place too, where I was playing with some friends and whatnot. But then like I've just bounced off every other one after like 5-6 hours, just like haven't found that moment with it where I'm just like engaged. But Elden Ring like immediately kind of had me hooked, and I think it was because of the greater freedom to it, the non-linearity, where I was able to just kind of go do whatever I wanted to do. And that part of it was pretty amazing. Beautiful game, very unique art style, even though it's not quote unquote the highest fidelity compared to other AAA studios. Like, it still looks a lot better than games that do have higher fidelity. We talked about the music as well. That's great. And like, of course, like this feels like almost an uninteresting thing to say at this point, but like these games have great combat. Like the combat system is difficult and punishing, but for the most part, very fair. And there's just like a ton of variety here in the different weapon types, where I was constantly switching between different play styles, and I ended up really drawn to like the just big huge axes. Like that was just really fun for me. It's just so satisfying to like jump down on an enemy and crash into them with like this massive axe and deal tons and tons of damage. So that was kind of my go-to play style. In the characters episode, we talked about how great Torrent is as a both horse / companion. I mean,
horse.
He's not talking to you, but yeah, like this is the best feeling horse, where it's like, man, this is just like unlocked a whole other element of the combat that I really enjoy. The horse combat is really fun. And like there's even like certain boss encounters that are designed around utilizing the horse, and those are really fun as well. So yeah, I don't know if I have any original takes when it comes to Elden Ring, honestly, but it is just that good. It is as good as everyone says it is, and I totally loved my 70 hours with it. There are some moments that I wasn't with it, or I have some criticisms. You can go back to our podcasts on those. I don't think I need to bring them up here when I'm talking about how it's my third favorite game of the year, but I love it. It is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, really suspicious that I haven't said a word about Elden Ring yet.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm like, okay, well, your top 2 is, for me, it's now at this point, it's like, oh, I wonder what he's gonna pick for the order. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think we know what's coming for you.
I think it's pretty fucking obvious right now. All right,
Reveal it. What's number 2?
second place, God of War Ragnarok.
Okay, I figured, but yeah.
I really love 2018. I think this game just like we've talked about this game ad nauseum, man. This game really does just like I think you said, just like polish off some rough edges about 2018 in a way that is it improves it in almost every regard. I have some minor complaints if I'm being nitpicky about this, but like the thing that I can pretty much mirror everything you've said so far this podcast. And then obviously we've talked about it plenty in previous ones. But the thing that I do want to defend here is this combat is so fucking good. I love God of War Ragnarok's combat. Like, I feel like it is constantly making me it's punishing. Like I like playing this on the harder difficulty. I think even at normal, like this game can be quite punishing when you get into some of the side content. But the amount of variety you have with how you can handle every single like enemy encounter and the way that they throw enemies at you. I don't think this game has the most variety when it comes to enemies, but it is a really good job of making every single enemy a specific puzzle piece. Like if you have this kind of character that's like throwing fireballs at you, then maybe he has the defense against fire attacks, and he is just this kind of like annoyance, while you have let's say a troll next to you that is like actually your prime suspect and the one that's going to do the most damage to you. You really have to like think about how you're going to handle these guys in order. And like the way that you can handle them is so incredibly different, which is super fun. Like you can throw a spear at that guy who's chucking stuff at you. If he's close to a ledge, you can sweep him from far away with the Blades of Chaos and make him like slide down into a pit. Like you can grab them and pull them close to you and launch them into the air. Like it's just like it gives you so much agency over how you handle every single enemy. And like just really surprising to me that like over the shoulder combat could be that good. Like I expect like action games to have this like really pulled out, almost like Devil May Cry, original God of War style, Bayonetta, right? Like all of these games have like kind of a very similar setup. And God of War 2018 and then even further for Ragnarok did a really good job of meshing kind of that sort of combat and almost like a Souls game, kind of like just kind of cadence to the way that the combat, like this really heavy hitting, methodical nature to the combat. All the enemies hit extremely hard on some of those harder difficulties that they actually become like serious threats. The difference between how Kratos and Atreus operate is like a really, really interesting kind of switch up and dynamic that I almost wish there was more hard content with Atreus, because I want to like do some challenging stuff with him. But the fact that they actually like create some really suitable differences between Freya and Atreus when they are your supporting character, I thought was really cool, because you got an opportunity to do some of those early difficult fights where you're having ghost wolves come out, but then maybe you decide like, hey, actually, I think Freya is going to be better for this fight, so I'll come back when I fight with Freya, and she's going to be doing all of her Valkyrie moves, which are really, really cool. She is like one of the, like, despite her chattiness at some areas in the game, which is, like I said, definitely a nitpick, her moveset's so cool. It really does kind of almost feel like, hey, I've got a Valkyrie like homie next to me. Like when you press that triangle button, she does like a straight up insta kill on some enemies when they're kind of like in this down state almost. I'm trying to like the Muspelheim challenges are fantastic in this one and really do make you think about every piece of the way the combat works. Sometimes you have to play King of the Hill. Sometimes the King of the Hill thing is moving around as you're fighting all of these enemies. Every once in a while, like you have like kill enemies to regenerate your health as you slowly lose health. Like they just add all of these different modifiers to the combat that like make you use it completely differently. Then starting off with the axe and the Blades of Chaos, I think is a really nice adjustment to the last game, because you get to a point where you like play with the axe for a while, make it a little stale, and then you switch to the Blades of Chaos. You have that variety right off the bat. Such a good parry. Oh my God, I love parrying in this game. Like, just I feel like I will just like people will be doing a combo and it's just like bang, 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 bang. Like you just have this like you can get the timing down so naturally in this, whereas like most games don't allow you to like just do this like parry chains that you can do in this. That is pretty cool. Like in like Elden Ring or in a Souls game, it feels like almost like you're parry fishing and you're like waiting for a specific attack and then you do a parry. This one, it's like I'm going to parry every single thing every enemy does unless it's an unblockable, and then I'm going to dodge roll out of that. And you just start feeling like a menace. It is super fun. The additional content in this game, some of the hard mode bosses are some of my favorites in video games. I love just like a good arena based hard ass enemy. Like just put me in a circle with a dude who is just going to mess my shit up. And I have to figure out how to get over this challenge. Like I love that in Souls games. It's a big reason why I'm a big fan of like Kingdom Hearts 2. Like I know that's a weird one, but like people underestimate Kingdom Hearts 2 on critical mode is like top tier combat in a video game. Cool. Same reason I love like Devil May Cry 3. It just does all of those things so well in this. On top of having 5-star acting, like 5-star characters, really impeccable storytelling, like just it is doing so much right that I feel like most games get tons of praise for just for doing one or two of these things, where it's just like across the board is kind of nailing it. I think the only things that this game suffer from is maybe some slightly dated level design, and that's it. Every once in a while, I'm like, man, why do I got to crawl through this hole?
A lot of hole crawling.
Why do I got to pick up this? Why do I got to pick up this ledge again? Yeah, like yeah. Sometimes, climbing up a ledge. I'm tired of doing that in video games, man. I don't know how to fix that problem either. So I can't like complain too much because following the yellow lines or finding the white lines. I know that was something we talked about when we were discussing 2018 and how that's an annoyance. But like, it's either that or you just let me scale every wall, and sometimes that's too open. Sometimes you need some limitations. So yeah, maybe one day somebody will come through and that'll be the solution to that problem, but I still don't know what it is yet. So I'll have to accept it for now. It's gonna gives it like a 0.5.
Yeah, one little gripe, right?
Yeah,
I hear you. Cool. Love to hear it. Okay, next up for me, number 2. This was my game of the year for most of the year. It recently got dislodged, but Triangle Strategy.
Oh yeah.
I love this game so much. Look at this. 2 tactics games in my top 5 this year with this and Midnight Suns. And it's cool because they're both very, very, very different, right? This is the kind of the more classic. You're on a grid. It's not one like my turn, enemy turn. It is more fluid in that, the speed stat and all that. But Midnight Suns, I really like. It's kind of like, okay, that Into Breach style with some other innovations. But this is like, man, I've been so bored of Fire Emblem's strategy in the last couple iterations. And this is more Final Fantasy Tactics style than it is Fire Emblem anyway, but it is more of that style than we're talking about these Into the Breach kind of ones. And my God, it is so good at doing that part of it. Really innovative and taking, like I've seen elements of this, like facing, choosing your facing direction or like interesting turn order and stuff like that done in other games. But this one takes all that stuff and jams it into one and is just like one of, if not the best tactics games I've ever played in that way. Like it's so good. I also too, like I love I talked about some of the characters in that episode that we did, but I think it's tricky to pinpoint one because it really is an ensemble cast, and I really do like most of the cast here. And in terms of the, like, you'll get like different archers in this game, but each of them feel quite different. And then there's all sorts of really unique class types that I've just never really seen. We talked about Decimal and how weird he is with the multiplication attacks. The character who's just an engineer and builds ladders and traps and stuff like that. Like that's so interesting to me. So in terms of that, it's all great. I think for me too, the thing that's like elevating this and making it number 2, and it was like number 1 for most of the year for me, is that like once again, Fire Emblem. I've played tons of these games. It's always this country is at war with this country, and then there's a third country who's also involved in some way.
Yeah.
And I just check out within like minutes. Don't care. Skip all that dialogue. I loved the story in this game in terms of that Game of Thrones, the element of these different countries, and they're warring with each other, and they're taking land here or there. They maybe won a battle, took this part, but then they lost this other battle and lost that section. I love it for two reasons. One is that there isn't one set villain in this game. The villain who was the leading villain for most of the experience for me, I ended up teaming up with in the end to turn against this other third faction, and that was always kind of a sketchy idea. I'm like, are they really going to work with me here, or are they just like saying this and they're going to stab me in the back like 5 minutes from now? But that part of it was super intriguing, but also that you have a ton of agency over that story. You have decisions early on. This is like which country you're going to go to, but then you have other decisions that are like have a much bigger scale, and like that impact will be felt for that rest of that experience. And so this is, you know, like whatever. I play like over 60 games this year. I'm always trying to like knock things off the backlog too. When I finish a game, I'm done with it. I move on to the next thing because I got a lot to play. The day after I beat Triangle Strategy, I booted up that New Game Plus because I wanted to see how things were different, how things work differently. And yeah, it changed. Like a lot of things do change in those second playthroughs, and also like you just get completely different characters too. So like even the tactics is totally different. I played New Game Plus, so I had all my characters going with me. But it's like, man, this would be everyone's gonna have a very different experience with this too. And then when they go deeper, they'll find that there's like a lot more to be found in that New Game Plus. There's tons of characters you can't get until the second playthrough in that New Game Plus, and like those are pretty fun because it's like one of the leading villains in the game you can like get on your team, which is very
that's cool.
You know, fun to do that kind of thing. We mentioned this in both the visuals and music. I didn't fight for it as much as I could have, and I think it's because like Octopath has a very similar style. So this isn't like new or innovative, but like this game looks great. It looks fantastic. The music I love too. I listened to the soundtrack recently again in preparation for our episode. And, like there's been one or two songs that are just stuck in my head. They're like kind of like on loop because I listened to them so much as I played like 60 whatever hours of this game earlier this year. What else do I want to say? I think the progression's great here. It's kind of got like simple skill trees for each characters, but you have very limited resources in terms of who you want to upgrade. And I was really captivated by that element of it. And yeah, I think that's all I got to say for Triangle Strategy. Just all around, like this for me, the most consistent game of the year, where like every single element of it I really, really, really enjoyed. It's kind of like jack of all trades, but it also is a master of all these things too. Like it is just the most consistent experience for me. Even my number one, there's like I could throw some issues at it. I don't think I have a single issue with Triangle Strategy. I loved it all the way through.
Man, this is moved way up in my list of like, all right, when Midnight Suns is done and you have a strategy, you're in a strategy itch. This is like has to be the game I play now. Definitely. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier in the year, and I bounced off of it a little bit, but yeah, it sounds like almost every single game that I bounced off of this year, I did not do I did a disservice.
We both have that. There's like games on opposite lists where like I bounced off Sifu, or like I enjoyed my time with Signalis, but I did try it again, and I don't know, just not really for me. But I think in this year at least, I feel like we're both able to appreciate what each other likes about these games, even if we both kind of didn't have that same experience with it. But then we also do have a lot in common too. We already have like 3 or 4 things that are on both of our lists here. So
yeah, totally. It'll make those conversations a little easier here in a minute.
So let's cruise into your number one, which I think is, going to be some more overlap here.
All right. GOTY. Callisto Protocol. No, yeah, all right. Let's get real here. Sorry, Callisto Protocol. I hate to make you a bit of a joke over and over again, but man, that game bummed me out. Elden Ring. Elden Ring. You already talked about it a bunch. We've talked about it a bunch. I will continue to talk about it a bunch. Elden Ring is truly like a Venn diagram meeting in the middle for me in a way that I never expected it to. Like in the same way that I think Zelda Breath of the Wild was. Like I just never expected such an incredibly well-crafted open world, and then also for that to be a Zelda game. They took everything right about Breath of the Wild and then made it a Miyazaki game. And it's just kind of flawless for me in almost every regard. Like I'm a huge FromSoft fan, so I know where like you've bounced off of a lot of these games. I've always loved what they've done, and like multiple of those games could end up in my like top 5 if I felt like being unfair to other video games. And I feel like with Sekiro, I did miss a lot of that that build variety that Elden Ring gives you in waves. That is like, I think, some of the best parts of like the Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. Like those, I think that is, and as well as Bloodborne. I think that's something that it does, or their games do so well, is just creating this kind of power fantasy regardless of what direction you want to go in. I went for a pretty heavy bleed build, and then I switched to like some magic stuff where I was doing a lot of the like space magic, a lot of the gravity based magic, using big curved swords in both of those builds that I thought was really cool. The fact that you can use this gigantic hulking weapon and then also be primarily focused on magic or bleeding enemies. It's just like, it feels like you can do anything. It feels like, hey, I want to be focused on using a staff, but my staff turns into a gigantic magic blade. Like it feels like they just accounted for every kind of cool sort of thing you want it to do. You want to be Guts from Berserk? Go be Guts from Berserk. You want to be a Star War? Go be a Star War. You know, like it's like you literally can have lightsabers in this game. It's insane. They're magic lightsabers, but they're still lightsabers. This big blue blade that
I mean, aren't regular lightsabers kind of magic? You might say science fiction. That's kind of magic.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we'll call it. It's a stone that makes
Star Wars. Let's talk
lasers.
more about it.
Anyway, but yeah, just the way that this game is, the story is told, I think works so well for it being a large open world. I think people talk about how Miyazaki storytelling is either like you're really into it or you really don't like it because it's not offering you that kind of like full story in one go. It's kind of like offering information in the things, the item descriptions and meeting NPCs that you might miss, and then even when you do have all that information, you still kind of have to craft the story yourself. I think this does a smarter job of that because items are so missable that it almost feels like it excuses some of the storytelling gripes that people might have in a Dark Souls. Whereas like, okay, I have this linear almost experience and I still don't have a full understanding of the story. Why is this? Where it's like, oh, in Elden Ring, just did you go here? Did you talk to this guy? Did you find this item? Like it creates this reason to explore more. It has this, like, if you are somebody who's like really into lore, you have an even stronger reason to explore this world. Whereas like if you just want to kind of get into the like have stronger options in gameplay, you still have those reasons to explore the world. If you want to just see these incredible visuals, you have a good reason to explore this world. It kind of calls to you in every direction constantly in a way that I think is so much better at doing an open world than say like in Assassin's Creed, where it's just like, all right, there's an icon, go towards the icon. In this game, it's like, oh my God, there's this like big arch over there. What could that possibly be? And then you get there and there's this whole almost like micro story that can be built into these individual spaces. Like you can really start to think about what was happening in this world and why these people are here. Like it just surprised me every single step of the way. Like every corner had something interesting to do, whether it be a cave that maybe like the caves were maybe, or like the little minor dungeons were maybe some of the lesser interesting things to do, but they still had like really good combat challenges. There was still typically a really good reward at the end. The boss fights are fun no matter what boss you're fighting in this game. I can't think of a Elden Beast at the last boss fight is probably the only boss fight I dislike in this game.
Yeah.
Every single other one I think is like, it's incredible. It's incredible. Like they're fantastic challenges. The fact that you can take, this is something that you mentioned, but improves on almost every other Souls game previously, is that you really can take things at your pace. For a series of games that does not have difficulty levels, is notoriously challenging and pretty punishing. The fact that it's like, okay, I can run into the first horse guy and fight him over and over and over again and potentially beat him before you even get, oh my God, the horse, the yak.
Torrent,
Jesus Christ. Game of the year for getting major key characters. But yeah, like the fact that you can even fight that and defeat it before you even find Torrent. But then the second you find Torrent, you realize that boss fight gets a lot easier. Or you can go roam to Castle Morn and fight kind of like an early challenge that seems like a little bit better paced, or you can really just go anywhere. You can find your way into Liurnia before you fight Margaret. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to just move around this world and in these secret spaces that you just don't expect. It's constantly surprising. It's constantly giving you cool like Easter eggs along the way. It's giving you good reasons to go pursue certain quest lines that you stumble upon. It's just one of the coolest open worlds I've ever experienced. The storytelling is way up my alley. I love kind of how dark and brutal this world seems to be, and how just kind of almost like there is like everybody's kind of at their last, like at the end of the line almost, and which they technically are. You finish almost every single side quest finishes with that person dying. Which I always think is like incredibly entertaining for some strange reason, but like it is just you're watching these tough moments for a lot of these people, and it does kind of expand the world every step of the way. Like anytime you were having a conversation with somebody, you realize there's like maybe more to this world than you realized. It does everything it's trying to do perfectly. It had some minor jank. They patched it so many times. We haven't even talked about the PvP in this game, which I think is super good. Like some of the better PvP, like I think I really like original Dark Souls PvP. I really like Dark Souls 3 PvP. But a lot of those, like Dark Souls 1 got reduced to some specific areas being like primary places to do your fighting and your ganking in. Whereas like you just have so much space to do, like to go into people's worlds and kind of mess their day up, but they also make it a lot more forgiving. You're not just going into some person who just gave themselves full health, so they're open to getting invaded. Now you have to have summoned a partner, so it's these 2v1 situations that are really scary for the person invading. It's the fact the build variety like leans into that immensely. Like there's so many little cheesy things you can do to people that it's not technically cheesing, but it's like, okay, this is clearly built just for PvP experiences. Like I can wear a mask that makes me look like their friend, and I'm going up and I'm like walking around hanging out with them, and then I just out of nowhere start ganking the host. Like there's just too many fun moments. Like you can create your own fun in this game in a way that I did not expect, as well as having this incredible curated experience. Yeah, we've talked about Elden Ring a ton.
It deserves the love. It deserves the love.
Oh my god, I will carry the Elden Ring torch for a long time, I'm pretty sure, and I can't wait for more DLC. Coliseum just came out. That's super fun. You can do like 3v3s with people. It's a blast. Yeah, that game just never stopped being like some of the most fun I had this year. I said that about 3 other games, but like it's been a good one.
No, I feel like for me, talking about everything on like 8th up on my list, it's like the way I'm talking about this could be a game of the year. Like
absolutely,
yeah, very, very strong
really
game.
stellar stuff this year. But for me, Elden Ring is just like cream of the crop.
Okay, so for me, like I said, I was last few weeks been like tossed around like what is that number one for me, and I was like it couldn't be this one. But then when I actually had it there, like written on a list, I was like. That feels right. That's got to be it. And that is Grounded, my 2022 game of the year. I can't think of a time when I've like not had a game finished and it's my game of the year. This is a weird case where it's an open world game, obviously. So it's like, are you ever really finished with these games? Like, not really. But I don't know how close I am to like rolling credits, whatever. I think I'm probably close, but then I don't know. I just found my way like underneath the shed, and that's like this whole new area, and then I'm like terrified of, but it's like I think I have to go through there now. There's all sorts of stuff, but man, I think for me it's, I don't know, if I think about like what my favorite like genre is, very specifically it's like the Bethesda open world game, for all the issues they have and all the problems those games have. Just the design they have for their open worlds is just my favorite place to exist in. And Grounded very much feels like that for me. And not in the way that there's like towns that you're going to with all sorts of NPCs and dialogue, but in terms of that exploration loop for me, it's got that down to a T. Totally. Obviously it's the first person element as well, but I just love roaming around and exploring this world the setting of it, and once again, like Elden Ring has got a lot of praise this year for like not putting icons on its map, and like I guess Grounded technically has like the chips. There's like they're throwing on the maps like roughly.
Not egregious.
I at no point ever went to a place because I saw something on the map. It's just like I see a lawnmower and I want to go see what's in that lawnmower. So I'm going to spend hours and hours like figuring out how do I get there safely and set up a little base there and go explore this thing. And I've just had that never ending, and I'm still like, I'm 40, 50, maybe 60 hours in, and like there's still just areas I haven't been to yet. I have essentially a quest list on my phone because there isn't one in game of just like things I want to go do. And I'm like, I gotta go check out that garbage over there. I know there's something over there. I haven't even checked out the garbage yet. So I don't know, just tons and tons of stuff to still go and do. But man, I just love cruising around this world. It is so much fun. It's beautiful. The music is fantastic. The combat, I'm admittedly cheesing a lot of it because these enemies are, quite big, and they kind of sometimes get clipped. They can't clip through the grass and stuff like that. So I'm cheesing some enemies, but at the same time, it's like they're just stupid little bugs. I'm a smart human, so like I feel like this is fair, but I don't like it's
real life.
There is still like a ton of great combat sequences. I have not done a ton of combat in this game, but co-op is what I was trying to say. I've not done a ton of co-op, but it's fun. Even Dante, we played for like an hour the other night. We were planning on playing a longer session. Didn't end up happening, but still, we had this battle where we're around your base, and like we were getting like multiple spiders were coming through, and then mosquitoes joined us, and then the mosquitoes were getting trapped in the spider web so that we could take out the mosquito. And like that was such a fun combat sequence. And that was just a completely kind of immersive simmy kind of element, like this emergent gameplay systems that are coming together to make this unique battle that I had never experienced in all of my hours. And even though you guys aren't quote unquote as far as me, we were able to have this very unique sequence that, it was like a one in a lifetime kind of experience. And that was like super fun. It was a short-lived session, but I still had a ton of fun playing with you and you and Nathan the other night. And I don't know, like I've had multiple of those where when I was playing with another friend, I'm like, okay, let's take down some fireflies tonight. And that was like a huge combat like challenge that we took on that was like super difficult, but it's like, oh, we got so many great rewards from it. So I'm gonna keep going here. This is Signalis, very scary, great horror game. This is the scariest game I played this year.
It's got some moments,
so many terrifying moments of like a spider that just like you didn't know was right around this rock. Or for me, when I was going through the sandbox, I have to like go into this cave to like this anthill. And as I was saying in our levels episode, like this scorching sand is burning me at daytime, so I want to go there at night. And so I was doing that. I went down there, and then a fucking wolf spider was like in this cave, and it was right in front of me, and the sound it made, that was the scariest moment I had in a game this year, and I've had tons of those. Like the game is terrifying when it needs to be with some of these enemy types. There's a ton of these kinds of games where you're resource gathering, building bases. I love the base building in this game. I think it's kind of silly in a way, right? Because you're using little planks of grass to like build walls, and you're using like the feathers of a bird to like make a bed and things like this. But it's a really in-depth building system where you can be very precise, but it's very easy, and it's not too difficult to like build a really cool base. I think because you can do that with just like basic resources, but then you can get the more rare resources to create like interesting pieces of furniture and whatnot. But I love that there seems to be, as far as I can tell, no limit on like how much you can build. So I have like multiple intricate bases, and then a ton of small little base camps that I've built all around. That's like, okay, I have one like right outside the radiation zone. That's just like a tiny little base, just has the basics in there. But then I have my more bigger sprawling, almost like little towns that I'm building all on my own. And it's like, yeah, like there like so many games like this. Even Followed is like there's a bar, and every time you put something, it's like you're filling up your bar. You only do so much, but this is like an open world game. You can build it wherever the fuck you want, other than like some underground areas. And like as far as I can tell, there's absolutely no limit to how much you can do, and that is so exciting for me that I just have like multiple bases everywhere. And I don't know, I'm just like getting so familiar with every like curve and divot in the ground in some areas as I'm spending so much time with them. And God, like a never-ending, super fun like gameplay loop of exploration, building, getting set up for like what is going to be a difficult dungeon or combat sequence, and like preparing for that and then achieving it, getting the next set of rewards, and all that is like, damn, it's such a strong gameplay loop.
I'd say like they have succeeded in doing what it seems like Bethesda's been trying to do for a while with like Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, just trying to get like their base building in those games are pretty bad, I'd say. And
I
this
hope
one,
Starfield
like,
elevates it, because so far the clip we got of Starfield base building looks really cool, and I'm excited to build some moon bases.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully it does live up to that and doesn't have those limits, or doesn't make it as difficult as it is to just build. And like Fallout, you have to get so many resources to make anything halfway interesting. It takes so long, whereas Grounded, like immediately you can just build up the foundation of your house in like 10 minutes if you want.
Grounded is a game I've said previously, I've been tied to kind of another person and playing with, which means that I have not been able to play as much, but I could easily see it cracking my top 10 as I get further and further into that game. Like, I think that's a worthy number one. Like, that game is super, super fun. Shout outs to Obsidian this year, man. Like,
yeah, and I was just going to mention this too, where like Obsidian is known as being an RPG house. They make these great RPGs with all, and this doesn't have that dialogue story element in their way their RPG does. But I think the part that kind of snuck up on me, because you don't really encounter it in an overt way in the first like hour, dozens of hours, is the progression system. Because of course they're so good at making like systems in which you're leveling up and those being compelling and interesting, and you can't do everything. You kind of have to pick and choose. And I think this game has like an amazing progression system where there's a few different ways. So one obviously is, you're finding things, you're finding resources, you take them to the resource analyzer, and then it's like, okay, I can make this new armor set. And that's a thing that you're constantly, as you're fighting tougher and tougher enemies, finding different parts, like bug parts from them, building different gear and weapons and stuff. So like obviously that progression is pretty straightforward. But then there's also the finding the teeth, the milk molars, which I don't know if you've done that, because I don't think
I've not
you don't have the level 2 hammer, right?
Yet.
So you can't break
I don't
them.
have a high enough level hammer.
But that's great, because that's a huge part of the progression that is, you have to get to that second level hammer before you can actually start breaking them. But then it's just a progression that's like, okay, the more I discover this world, the more I explore, the more I get to level up, which is fantastic. It's just experiential based in that way without having an XP bar. And that's really fun, because that's such a limited resource too. And you have your golden milk molars and you have your basic ones, and those are your basic, okay, I'm gonna level up health or damage or how much inventory space I have. And then the gold ones are team-based things. So everyone in your lobby is gonna get like these certain upgrades.
Cool.
And so I like the mix of that. But then the other, I guess, progression system is like the mutation system. So that's once again based on experience, but it's not like overt. It's not like I have a slashing skill and every time I attack an enemy that goes up. It's just like it surprises you, where you're just randomly, you finish a combat encounter and it's like you've unlocked the like barbarian mutation. And then I like that too, because that's a limited thing where you can only have two when you first, I think it's two when you first start the game. You only have 2 mutations activated at a time. But then with the milk molars, you can get that up to 5. But even then, like, there's so many that you really got to pick and choose. And I find that I'm constantly switching between them, of like, depending on what my situation is. If I'm going to go underwater, I'm going to choose which ones I want to spec out. If I'm going to do this certain combat encounter, I'm going to maybe spec out my sharpshooter one and my javelin attacks to like upgrade those. And I love that, because it's just, I'm using this thing and then I get like bonuses put on top of it that I didn't even know I was building towards. But just because I naturally like using the bow and arrow, the game is like rewarding me in a way, but it still is tricky because I can't have all of it at once. So I think between that gear progression system, the milk molars, and the mutations, I think that's like a really, really well designed and very in-depth progression system that, once again, surprises you. For the first few hours, you don't even know you're leveling up your character in those ways. So
I did not realize you have to equip the mutations.
Oh no!
I thought
in your inventory.
I know. I've looked at them and everything. I was like, oh, I got all these mutations, great. And I thought they were just like all stacking on top of each other. I didn't realize that I have to actually like select them. That's
no doubt you have the quickness one unlocked, which just lets you move quicker. Yeah, so make sure you put that one on, because then you can just cruise around the map at a quicker pace. So that's a good one to have.
All right, yeah, pro tip.
But yeah, it still is like, those are tricky decisions, because those are all good. Some of them are maybe more niche, where it's like I don't always need the one to breathe underwater longer, but when I actually wanted to,
I had that one like so early on in the pond level, and I was still like just struggling to get through that space, and it could have been easier, man.
Yeah, and then there's also like kind of beyond that too, you'll find kind of offhand or like accessory items, I forget whatever they're called. And these are kind of harder to find, but this would be like, this increases your melee damage, but now your parries suck. So you just like, there's even added progression on there where I've collected a few of those now, so I can spec my character out in different ways. So that all that feels great. So yeah, I'm having so much fun with this game. It's like a never-ending thing where each session I go in, I'm like, okay, I have my good short-term goals, long-term goals. And I still like haven't been to this area of the map. I'm so curious what's over there, or going back to an area I've been to before, and there's like this other stuff I didn't do yet. Like some of these enemies are still so difficult. I've tried a couple of those mixers. I've still not completed one, so I don't even know what those give you when you complete them. I'm guessing they give you some science, but maybe there's some other progression system that I haven't even interacted with yet. Like, I just feel like this game's never ending, and I also don't want it to, right? I just want to I want to exist in this backyard forever, and I know I still have like at least a few tens worth of hours worth of stuff to do, and that's just what I know of yet. I'm sure there's more afterwards, so I'm very happy for this to be my game of the year. And yeah, like I said previously, I played this game when it first came out in like the early access period, like 2 years ago or whatever it was, and I don't know, going from what my impressions of playing it then to like my experience with it now is like I never would have expected this game to be as good as it is. And once again, with the small team that within Obsidian that they did to make this and Pentiment, like that's crazy how talented the studio is, and it's crazy the scale of this game in particular, just in terms of like how much graphics are in it and the scale of it for it being like a small team is just wild to me. It's insane.
Studio of the year goes to.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like PlayStation has Insomniac and they're pumping out Ratchet and Clank, Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Like there's so many games they're pumping out, and I feel like Obsidian's kind of in that camp now too, where the Game Pass thing, they're able to make these smaller scale things. But like, yeah, they have Avowed, Outer Worlds 2 both announced, just released 2 games this year. Like it's their output is
pumping them out, man.
Insane. Yeah, it's great. Good stuff. Okay, there you go. There's our top 10 list. I will bring this up on. Actually, you know what? Let's take our last break of the show. We'll come back. We'll recap our lists, and then we will make our collective list, which I'm excited for. I thought it was going to be easier when we started today, but I think it might be a bit trickier now that I've seen what our 2 lists are. So let's take our last break, and we are going to close it out with the Sidequest Game of the Year list, the top 10 for Sidequest, our collective list here. But yeah, let's quickly recap what our top 10s were. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. And my list, starting from 10, God of War Ragnarok, 9 was Sniper Elite 5, 8 Neon White, 7 Rogue Legacy 2, 6 was Weird West, 5 Midnight Suns, 4 Tunic, 3 Elden Ring, 2 Triangle Strategy, and 1 Grounded. Do you want to read yours off, Dante?
Yeah, so my list for 2022, number 10, Marvel's Midnight Suns, number 9, Pentiment, number 8, Salt and Sacrifice, number 7, Sifu, number 6, Signalis, number 5, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, number 4, Neon White, number 3, Vampire Survivors, number 2, God of War Ragnarok, and number 1 was Elden Ring.
Good stuff. Okay, so first we got to decide which 10 games are going to, get forwarded onto this list. How many do we have in common? We have Elden Ring, God of War, Neon White, and Midnight Suns. Those 4, right? From our lists?
Looks right.
About right. So yeah, I think those 4, we'll lock those ones in. We'll, figure out the order later, but I'll just bring all these 4 along with us. I don't think any one of those, if one of them was low on one of our lists, they were very high on the other one. So I think it makes sense that all of them would make it on. I guess, is there anything that didn't make it on either of our lists that would be like so close to the top 10 that it would be worthy of making it on? Is there any of those that you can think of off the top of your head
that didn't make it on our top 10s but is worthy still?
Like I'm thinking, like, I really like Cult of the Lamb. I have some issues with it, but like it's close. I also don't know, did you ever go back and play more Rollerdrome?
No.
Okay, because that was like very much on the cusp for me, but if you didn't connect with it, that's fine. No, that's all good. I don't know, can you think of any other ones that wouldn't be on our lists here that would be relevant in this discussion? I don't know if there is.
Stray.
Oh, that's actually a good one. That, because Stray was also in my kind of 11 to 15 range. Maybe I'll write it down here.
There's not a mutual. It's not mutual on ours, but it is definitely one that I'm like more than happy to kind of slot down there because the game I absolutely loved as well is Grounded. Like easily makes Grounded. It into that.
Yep. I think from your list too, I've liked my time with Vampire Survivors and Signalis, so I think those could be easy ones. I haven't complete them by any means, but I did like my time with both of them.
Very
So
cool.
those could be ones. I'll bring them down.
I would heavily fight for Vampire Survivors. Obviously, Signalis I adore, but I can understand where that's maybe a little bit more specific to me. Vampire Survivors I think is one of the cooler releases of the year.
What about Tunic for you? Like where was that
Tunic,
for you?
Tunic definitely. Tunic definitely. Like I really enjoyed Tunic. I think ultimately I didn't get some of those extra pieces that that you were able to, that I think once I do go back and experience those, it'll like fly up my list. I felt like it was a really good Zelda, like ultimately with some like really neat stuff happening around the edges, and I think that stuff around the edges I should have maybe dug into a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Also from your, like, I do like Pentiment as well. Of course, I didn't get to what sounds like the best parts of it, so that's maybe a bit tricky. It was also only at 9 on your list, so I've written it here. I don't know if it's going to hang, but I'm curious what you think on Weird West too, because obviously you had some time with it.
Yeah, Weird West I really ended up enjoying. I didn't necessarily finish it. Kind of the same situation as you with Pentiment. I think it's one of those things where I interacted with it enough to kind of get my fill. And I think initially it wasn't rubbing me the right way when I first started playing it. But like I said previously, I think I truly started to get what it was asking of me, and I started enjoying it much, much more. Yeah, I kind of want to still see where that story goes ultimately, and like I do want to kind of see what some of the mechanisms are like for some of the later characters. So I don't feel like I have a full understanding of everything that game has to offer, but I think what it showed me was really cool. Another game that is up on your list, but I played a decent amount of and really enjoyed, and I can see it kind of. Yep, it's that one.
Rogue Legacy.
Rogue Legacy 2 is a game that I found a lot of enjoyment, and from what I did play, I just have not had an opportunity to dig in further.
Okay, so I'm looking at this, and I think the 7 locks for me would be Neon White, Elden Ring, God of War, Midnight Suns, Grounded, Tunic, Vampire Survivors. Like those feel like very solid.
Yeah.
So that would mean we have 3 slots between the next 5, which I think is maybe between Rogue Legacy, Signalis, Stray, Pentiment, Weird West. I actually really feel like Stray, it would be well slotted in like maybe 10th or 9th or something like that. But for me, it is truly like, I think the hardest, like in terms of ordering for me, the hardest was for me like 11 to 14. It was like Stray, Roller Drone, Tinykin, maybe Serial Cleaners. Like I feel like those were all very close for me, and like a lot of these games came out in the last couple months. If those hadn't come out, like would have been really tough to decide which one. But I don't know, how passionate are you for
I
Stray in that way?
got bored with Stray.
Okay.
I really enjoyed kind of what it was doing for the first like few sections, and then slowly it just started to lose me. I don't know why. Okay. It just sadly did. Like I think every single one of these games on here I enjoyed more than Stray.
Okay. Well, I think maybe Rogue Legacy 2 and Signalis could be the next like locks in that way, since they're both games that either one of us played a lot more than the other one, but we both enjoyed our experience. So that would leave us with one spot left, and this
between Pentiment and Weird West. Oh boy,
I don't really know which one. Like I'm fine with Pentiment. I'm fine if Weird West doesn't make it. So. And it doesn't sound like Stray would be the one for you, so that's fine. Like, one more look at our list. I actively dislike Sifu, so I don't need to get into why. Like, we're talking about the love for our games here, but I think that one be left off. I don't really see another. Oh, what about Triangle Strategy? Because you've played some of that. Is that a contender?
Yeah, I really am a sucker for a good strategy game. It's just a game that I didn't get to play. I didn't play more of. I think the one gripe I had with Triangle Strategy, and the thing that made me not dig in further at that time, was like there was other games I wanted to play, and how incredibly wordy that game was initially. Yeah. But I'm sitting here also fighting for a game that is exclusively wordy.
The word list. Yeah.
I don't really know how well I can kind of defend that. I think Triangle Strategy looks great. From what you've explained, the combat kind of goes further than a lot of other strategy games in the genre. I think that's I would have a harder time fighting between Pentiment and Weird West than I would just like giving you Triangle Strategy.
Yeah, it is number 2 on mine. I think that,
Yeah.
that maybe that's the difference, right? Is Pentiment was at 9 for you, Weird West was at 6 for me, whereas Triangle Strategy just like on the average it would be higher, I guess.
Yeah. That's fair to me. That definitely seems like it's the difference of me fighting for like Xenoblade, and I just feel like that's not going to pull any weight in this conversation the same way that some of these other ones would.
So
I think
before we get into
when
the
we're talking
order
about
of
our
it,
mutual lists,
yeah,
I think it really is kind of like, okay, this is stuff that we honestly like. I would happily play any of these video games, even Triangle Strategy, a game I did not play much of.
Yeah.
I would like. I'm straight up excited to play more of that game now.
Yeah.
Whereas like some of these other ones, I'm kind of like, I might get to it.
So, how do you feel? Okay, without the order factored in, how do you feel about these 10? I think that looks like a pretty strong 10.
This is strong. I'm surprised we got to it as quickly as we did. I thought that was going to be a little bit of a.
Well, yeah, because I was thinking last year. I remember we had Back for Blood snuck into our collective because we both enjoyed it and it wasn't quite a top 10, but since we also played it together, it felt like it needed to be on there.
Right.
And then also, like, I'm in the back of my head, I'm thinking about, because I'm calling this the Sidequest Game of the Year, I'm trying to think about what Travis, Kirkland, and Taylor picked. Taylor's Game of the Year was Call of Duty, so that's not going to make it. Kirkland's was Total War Warhammer 3. Great pick, but like...
Oh, apparently that game is... If my buddy Nathan was in here, he'd fight for that one too. Apparently that game is incredible, but like that is not my bag.
Yeah, so it's tricky to fight for those when either of us didn't play it. And then for Travis, his game of the year is Elden Ring. So like that also just, confirmation bias us on this one. But I feel like because of that, as we order this, Elden Ring's got to be 1, right? It's your number 1. It's my number 3. It's Travis's number 1. Like that's mathematically, and even just like how deserving is it? Like that deserves number 1.
Yes. All right. I thought it was going to be some sort of negotiation. That's incredible. I'm so happy with that.
I don't know. I mean, if I look at both of our lists and like if we just average out the math of it, like it just there's no way that any other game could take it out. I don't think so.
Totally.
So there we go. We got that one out of the way, which I feel like somehow number 1 ends up being like one of the easier decisions, and like some of these other slots end up being
automatically it's harder now. I have no idea where to go from here.
I feel
one idea, but
is it as simple as the next 3, like 2, 3, and 4 would be the games that were on both of our lists? Like, is that kind of an easy, straightforward thing?
If in my eyes, I love the look of this already. I'm like very happy with the top 5 if it ends up looking almost like it does how we have it written down.
Which would be Neon White number 2, God of War 3, Midnight Suns at 4. I think I like that too. Let's put it in there for now.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. Neon White getting its due like this makes me so fucking happy, man. Like I did not know if you were gonna play this game at all, and then the fact that you ended up just really enjoying it, just that's exciting for me. I thought I was gonna be like the Neon White weirdo in the group. You know what I mean? It's good.
Fun too, because like even like in the last 2 weeks, I'm like, hey, this is already making it my top 10, and then finishing it this week and it being like solidified, I think helps too, that it's like, the last level is the best, and that's so cool that the game is not hiding its best content, but it's like it's building up to that best content. I think is very cool. Okay, so next up, so you mentioned top 5, so you're saying Grounded as being like that.
I'd say that 5 slot is nearly tied for me between Tunic and Grounded. I'd say personally, I think I enjoy Tunic more, but I feel like Grounded and Tunic both have a lot more for me to see that I'm looking forward to. Right. Tunic makes it sound like that's going to be some like mind-blowing stuff and stuff that might like truly have kicked it into my top 10 if I had seen it.
Yeah, and hopefully I haven't like spoiled that element of it so you can still get that enjoyment out of it. I mean, it won't be quite as genuine, but hopefully you can still have it.
I knew there was more there. I just didn't know how much I. Anyway, but like, I love Fez. The Witness is one of my favorite games of all time. Like, I just love games that make you like, I don't know. It feels like your brain's cracking. Like, like you feel like this super sleuth going through this world, and it almost feels like you're digging into something that is just hidden from everyone. Almost like this deep dark secret within this game is That kind of like ARG aspect almost is really neat. It's really neat. So I give that a hell of a lot of credit. And then just like Grounded is just one of those games I'm surprised at how much I'm having so much fun with.
Yeah,
I'm not a big survival game guy, so I'm really thankful that I'm playing with someone else because they can do all the building shit and I can kind of like be our warrior. And that's been like a really good balance. But I do think if I was playing alone, I might be have less enjoyment of Grounded. Like I wouldn't want to be doing all the building stuff, and I would be getting like a little fatigued during those moments where that's necessary.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I think I'd pick Tunic.
Ground is my number one.
I know. When we're weighting them, though, like you can definitely give me a little bit of a veto there because it is weighted so much higher.
I'm gonna put it at 5 for now, and we'll see how I feel about that.
And then Tunic is a lock at 6.
Yeah, I mean it's hard for me. Yeah, I can't like take down Tunic to rise up Grounded, obviously, because they're both so good. So I think this is maybe the tricky 4 where I have
an easy one, I think.
For 7?
For 10.
For 10, okay. Would that be Triangle Strategy or is it something different?
Let's put Signalis at 10.
Okay.
I think Signalis is one of those games, like we're having conversations about a lot of these where I feel like maybe lean more towards one of us or the other. I think I am getting so much more out of Signalis than like where you're getting so much more out of Grounded.
Yeah.
Where I feel like it kind of like splits the difference a little. The gap starts to get kind of wide between us. Whereas Signalis is like by far one of my favorites of the year. But even in the rest of this conversation, like I see the mutual value in these games that are left more so than I feel like I need you to finish playing Signalis.
Right.
Whereas like it sounds like I have to play Triangle Strategy and I want to finish Rogue Legacy or play more Rogue Legacy. It's just I like to save. That's a perfect game to just like have for a good road trip or something like that. So I'm kind of saving it still.
Okay. Well, I think then to almost sandwich the Dante picks, I feel like Vampire Survivors at 7 feels right because it's so high on yours, and I do really enjoy it. I've spent 10, 15, whatever hours with it, and it is a lot of fun. I have discovered a couple Evos. I haven't ever gotten 2 Evos in the same run, and I'm not at a point yet where I can consistently get an Evo or anything like that. But it is just like dumb fun to like. That almost sounds disparaging, but like it is so simple, but effective at like it's what it's trying to do. It's
really smart in the way that the evolutions work too. That like once you find them, you can press start, and it shows you the evolution like recipe. Almost
right. Okay.
So you can kind of like start keeping track of like what you want to pick up as the game goes on. You don't have to like memorize every little piece because it ends up being overwhelming in the amount of upgrades you can get. Vampire Survivors, coolest surprise of the year, easily.
Sure, for sure. So how do you feel about Rogue Legacy and Triangle Strategy? Are you passionate one way or the other? I don't think for myself, I don't like as much as Triangle Strategy was my number 2. I don't know if I really care which number.
Well, I think you kind of just said it. It's your number 2. And it's that game that like I let slip me by more than I wish it did. I think I got turned off by a really wordy start and kind of
the first 3 hours. Maybe it doesn't set the best impression, which is too bad. But
yeah, because I think even when we did like that initial like preview review style thing, I played 2 hours of it at that point. Like I didn't get super deep into it. I didn't get an opportunity to like play a ton of it. And I feel like if I had an opportunity to interact with that combat more, I would have devoured that game. So Rogue Legacy 2, while amazing, is more Rogue Legacy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like whereas Triangle Strategy feels like it's really taking that strategy gameplay to a higher level for you.
Do you like the look of this list? I'm pretty happy with it.
I was going to say it's much easier than I think this happens every year. We talk for so long.
That's the thing. We do have so many long conversations that when it gets down to making that list itself, that becomes easier because we've already had the debates now. Now it's just like throwing numbers on things essentially.
Neon White above God of War is an insane thing that don't mind.
Let's keep it. Let's keep it. Yeah,
like I'd say in like just pure fun, Neon White won this year for me, but just like
yeah, I can actually agree with that. Yeah.
Total package, God of War like kind of sneaks higher.
Yeah.
But man, Neon White gave me great joy.
Then here it is, the Sidequest Game of the Year top 10 list at number 10, Signalis. Number 9, Rogue Legacy 2. Number 8, Triangle Strategy. Number 7, Vampire Survivors. Number 6, Tunic. Number 5, Grounded. Number 4, Marvel's Midnight Suns. I feel like that one kind of snuck higher than I was expecting on the collective list. Number 3, God of War Ragnarok. Number 2, Neon White. And number 1, we're basic, we're boring. It's Elden Ring. It's the
everybody's game of the year, man. Come on.
It deserves it.
We started the year off with a bang. There was no beating that game.
Yeah. That's a beautiful list, and what a great year it has been. So many great games. So fun making all these lists with you. Scroll down, I have all our best categories here. It was such a great time. Dante, thank you so much for joining me once again. I love that this is our third year doing these Game of the Year discussions, lists, all that fun stuff, and we'll absolutely be back doing it again next time. And I feel like now that this is done, I can sleep. You know, like I've been going so hard on some of these games the last 2 weeks as I'm like, I want to get as much Midnight Suns in as I possibly can. But now I can like not play for a day and be okay because we've done the list. Things are solidified. I can chill a little bit now.
Let's read a book.
Yeah, I did finish a book recently too, so you know I'm doing both. You did too. You play Pentiment. There you go. The best.
Yeah,
book
that is a book. That's funny.
Okay, good stuff, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Whether that you just listen to the top 10 episode, whether you listen to our 3 build-up episodes, whatever it may be, thank you so much for supporting the show this year. It has been so much fun, and Sidequest isn't taking a break. I think we're coming back next week to do like the preview for next year. So it never ends over here on the GeekVerse side of things, but this is it for the Game of the Year discussion. Thank you so much, and we will see you again next year. Bye-bye.
See you guys.